OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
7:30 Friday morning. Welcome along to OTB AM. Adrian and Owen with you this morning. Owen, how are you doing?
Good, Adrian. How are things?
Good, thanks, yeah. I was tuned into we've packed show, by the way. We'll let you know the amazing lineup that we have for you in just a few months' time, but I was tuned into the football pod during the week on, and I had to take a little bit of umbrage of what was going on, I have to say. It's, normally a very pleasant listening experience, and you sort of chip your way through the 4 hours of the show that Tommy likes to produce.
You took umbrage with Kildare being spoken about in a positive light, I presume.
I've been getting an awful lot of guff about that, surprisingly, on social media, and I mean, nobody was happier than me to see Kildare beat Dublin. I'm sure there were lots of people happier than me, but I wasn't unhappy to see Kildare beat Dublin, of course. I think when you give the context of
really.
Of course. You mean from an ego point of view that
ego,
suddenly my theory had been
hatred of Kildare.
Poked a hole. There's no hatred of Kildare. I don't consider them to be amongst the big players of. They're just not. They're just not.
Not even 90 seconds into the show.
I know I had not intended to go down that specific route, but they're just not in that. They aren't in that company. I think it's great that they've beaten Dublin. I think it's brilliant for. It'll be a better Leinster Championship for it, and Dublin are on the way in. And that's great. But the bit that specifically to sort of wrestle myself away from digging my hole even deeper here with Kildare fans, I think that the bit that I was taking umbrage I think it was Tommy particularly who was talking about the famous football pod, of course, with James Dunhu and Paddy Andrews and Tommy Rooney. Tommy saying that teams are out to get Dublin. This is great that Dublin are now gettable and teams are laying into them, giving them back the punishment for everything they've dished out over the last 10 years. And I'm just not really having it. It's not
right.
It's not Dublin anymore, really, is the thing. It's not, you can talk about everything they obviously dished out. It's not wholly logical that you can be dancing on the grave of that Dublin team by beating this Dublin team. It's just a different team. It's a different outlook. I don't believe that. By the way, this is not a point about Kildare celebrating the win over Dublin last weekend. They were absolutely dead right to do that, but it's just not Dublin anymore. What it brought to mind was, do you remember the You're Only Fools and Horses fan?
Yeah.
Do you remember the
if you give me a specific reference, I probably won't get it now. But
the Trigger broom, where he went to the council and Councillor Murray gave him a medal, as you can see pinned to his collar there.
Oh, you've got it lined up.
For saving the council money over there she is. He saved the council money over 20 years because he used the same broom. And as it turned out, the broom had 14 new heads and 17 new handles. And I think that it's not the same broom anymore. And I think that sort of stood over the carcass of that Dublin football team, Roy Keane and Alfinga Hallen style. It's just not that Dublin team anymore. I mean, I think it's right to celebrate it, but if Kerry are going buck crazy after beating them at some point, even in the championship, and laying it into them for everything that they've dished out to them for 10 years, it's too late. That ship has sailed.
I don't know if anybody's claiming that it's some sort of retribution for.
I think that's a perfect word. Sorry, Owen. That I think that's basically the point that Tommy was making.
I don't think it was though. I think that there is you're right. You can't go back and take 6 All-Ireland trophies off Dublin. Nothing you can do now can change the past. So I think it'll be ridiculous to think that they've finally got on. They've got level pegging with Dublin in the context of the last 15 years. I don't think anybody's thinking that with Kildare, but I do think that there is an absolute incentive, if you've been beaten down by this team for so long, to give a little bit more against them in every game, regardless of who is in the Dublin jerseys. There was massive incentive for Kildare last week, just like there was huge incentive for every team that Dublin have played against. And that was the point that they were making, that they are still viewed with a sense of aura, and they're still viewed as a team that could do with a beating. They could do with a beating, and every county says to themselves, before going out against them, we would love to beat them. That is still the case. That was the case with the Kilkenny hurlers long after the peak of their powers. It will be the case with this Limerick team. It is the case for this Limerick team, and teams are beating them at the moment in the league.
And that is an excellent point. So I think that the point about the retribution bit is totally appropriate to this Limerick team. Now, albeit there are players to come back in, and so there's a caveat too, but if that starts to happen to this Limerick team when they're back to full strength and it's in the championship, then I think that's it. Like, that moment was Kerry in 2019. That was the moment that that a team could have lorded it over that Dublin team and said, take that, you, and that was it. But I just think doing it now, it's like that Dublin team is a shadow. It's not itself, essentially.
Nobody's saying that it's not, though. Like, I did listen to that podcast this week, and that podcast, and nobody is saying that they're not a shadow of themselves.
But the point was that Tommy was making that teams are now, and this is not to take away from Kildare's win, I'll repeat, last weekend, but it is to say that the other better teams in the country. And I'll stand over the point that I made. Did I make it in this show last week? That I actually counted them out post the show last week. There's about 8 teams in the country who, on their day at the minute, could beat that Dublin team if they're playing like they are at the minute. So it's not. Like, when is the last time we could have even dreamed? That would have been a laughable statement. So it's a different team. It's not retribution what's going on. And I felt that the tone of the football pod was suggesting that teams were nearly like plastering up the 6 All-Irelands across the wall in advance and saying, let's layer it into these guys.
Like,
now.
I think that is absolutely fair game. That is not necessarily saying that you are on an even keel historically with the team if you go out beating them, but you're going up against a team that has Brian Fenton and Ciarán Kilkenny and Niall Scully and Brian Howard and Johnny Cooper last week. That absolutely is an added incentive. That absolutely is a team on a pedestal, a bunch of All-Ireland medals in that coterie of players, and that should be a reason to give them a little bit extra, to symbolically make that game more important than a game against Armagh, for example. And like, that's just the way sport works.
But it's the same thing as posting up some sort of a comment taken out of context in the wall, because it's not like, while and we made the point last week, there's still loads of quality in that Dublin team, and they probably on paper they should still be beating that Kildare team. There's no question about that.
But here's the thing, it's like kind of like in football when it's like when you've got a big club and they get beaten by a smaller club, even though the difference between them in the here and now may actually not be that great.
Yeah.
When Watford hammered Manchester United earlier this season, that was an amazing moment for Watford. Would they have had the same level of joy out of that result had they beaten Everton, had they beaten even Arsenal or Tottenham? I would say no, because Manchester United are seen as a bigger club. Are they definitely better than Arsenal and Tottenham? It's arguable, but there is no question that hammering Manchester United was more important than hammering Tottenham for that team of Watford players. That is exactly the scenario that we're in right now. Well, maybe not now, but that's the situation that maybe if things start to go on the downturn for Dublin over the next couple of years, that we will continue to be in. The Kerry footballers still go through that people love to beat Kerry. The Kilkenny hurlers have probably lost that a little bit now because it's been so long, but I do think that there is like this sort of big team mentality that if you beat them, it is this massive moment, but it also comes with this added incentive.
For all the slagging I did about Kildare, and you've compared them to Watford, I mean, I think that should be the thing that gets slipped up and taken away from this conversation. And I actually obviously largely agree with almost everything you're saying there. Only the point being that, like, I think the point about beating Dublin existed even before the 6 in a row. Like, even when they were a bit shite, teams still loved lording it into them.
I don't agree with that. I think that there was an element of it, but I definitely think that they were a bit of a joke in some quarters, to be honest, not before the 6 in a row, but before Pat Gilroy came in, and beating them in the league was not necessarily a big thing. So there's two factors. First of all, the league has changed now, where it is more important. Like, the Dubs themselves would say that winning a game in Killarney in 2010 was a very important moment in them actually going on this path. And then second of all is that the Dubs are a completely different beast. It's probably inarguable that they were the greatest team of all time, but what is definitely beyond argument is that this was the best Dublin team of all time. That they had taken all this notion of Dublin being a little bit flaky and, I guess fancy city lads, and they'd completely ripped that up and had been the most reliable team in the country on top of everything else. So I think that they have changed the mould completely around how Dublin has been viewed. So I don't actually think that there was this view of getting one over Dublin was good. Like, there might be a sort of like laughing at the like a country versus city thing, a little bit of a comic element to beating them, but
I think there was that always existed. I covered Dublin a lot around that time that you're talking about, pre all the success, and there still was there was definitely a bit more of a joke about it, no question.
Yeah.
But you love to beat Dublin. It was
Okay, yeah, that's fair.
there was a cocky. There was a part of that was to do with the personality, I think, or the perception of a personality of that team, right? Like the cockiness or the sort of thought they were better than they actually are type nature, I think, of the teams that went before that. And part of it was to do with the fact that the same thing that people are still having a pop off Dublin about now, just that they're a bigger population base and should be better than us.
Yeah. No. In fairness, it probably does. It does enhance things just a little bit. Like there is a sense that, say, even in the early 2000s, if you got a win over Dublin, there was definitely more of a sort of. It was funnier than beating Meath, even though Meath were a better football team. Because there is this notion of the Dubs being the kind of the big boys in the conversation around Ireland. So I see what you're saying for sure, but I do think that right now things are a lot different because on top of that kind of notion of Dublin being funny to beat, they then all of a sudden became the best football team of all time, or the most successful football team of all time. So
look, it was an opportunity for me to say that Kerry, when the broom was still the broom and it still had the same head and the same handle in 2019, and they didn't manage to roll over it, that was the missed the boat opportunity that you all have to live with for the rest of your lives.
Okay.
Darrow O'Toole says Kildare will know they've made it when I refer to them as eunuchs. In another
actually,
comment.
For people who aren't realise, people who weren't here last year, Adrian Berry referred to Mayo as eunuch.
I referred to them in a specific game where they were out without Cillian O'Connor and Oisin Mullen, if I'm right.
Cillian O'Connor hasn't been playing this year so far, Adrian, and they sure as hell look.
And actually, sorry, I didn't refer to them as eunuchs. I referred to them as a specific character from Game of Thrones, who's a eunuch, who's probably, and to repeat the point, one of the most likeable characters, and
they're still reeling,
redeeming
from that
character.
Maybe that's the motivating factor. Maybe that's
qualities.
Like you say, Varys. You said it, the Kildare, the Kerry teams have like 6 in a row up on the ball. James Horan just has a photograph of Varys.
Do you think it got discussed at some point in there?
No. Absolutely not. Did it get discussed in Kevin Kilban's household every day before the Mayo Dublin game last year? Yes.
And good morning to you, Kevin. He tends to listen back to us on a Saturday morning Canadian time when he's on his way into an MLS game.
I wonder if he's flying home for the big one next week.
I get reviews. And Peter G on YouTube, good morning to you, Peter G, says Kildare are the Spurs of the GAA, perennial bottlers, but seem to have no self-awareness of it at all.
Oof, that's harsh.
Wow.
I know that commentator isn't celebration policing, but I do feel that maybe, Adrian, you had a bit of celebration policing going on.
That is not true.
You were there with your arms folded watching that last week.
That is absolutely not true. And I've been getting loads of abuse about it. Again, people tend to take your point out of context. And actually,
you get particularly out of context.
To go all Trump about it, I think that nobody was happier than me. But maybe my point was even more appropriate after they beat Dublin, in the sense that Kildare, even though things were as Dublin had fallen back as much as they had, nobody would have predicted before the league started a Kildare win. I know that everybody got wise after the fact, but I'm just saying, when everything kicked off, when I was making my point, it was about a week into the league. I think it was legitimate at that stage.
Yeah, I think everybody shares your joy for Kildare.
And the Carpet Man saying what they're describing is the inferiority complex that's ingrained in rural Ireland.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. But I do think
even inferiority, I would never have associated either you or people from your land.
But what I was just about to say is that the inferiority complex is twofold. It's the country versus city thing, as we discussed, but also we are not 6 in a row All-Ireland champions, and you are 6 in a row All-Ireland champions. That's a pretty black and white, who's superior here situation. So I think that
or the team that went before is,
or the team that went before as well.
The team that went before that is 6 in a row All-Ireland.
You can't divorce that from the current team completely.
I think they're undergoing the terms of separation.
How would you feel if Westmeath beat them?
I mean, if Westmeath beat anybody, I'm delighted. But they are still top 8, 9 teams. Where are they in the power rankings?
7.
So, if Westmeath beat the teams that are considered top 7, I'm happy all day long.
Yeah, okay.
But I'm not going, oh, it's amazing, we've dethroned the All-Ireland champions.
Is that are you quoting a Kildare person there again?
No, it's not. I'm separating it. I'm divorcing it from the Kildare thing. Also to mention, just the top, the obviously unfolding and desperate situation in Eastern Europe. And the idea now that the Russian FA, this is the news that had come through in the last 24 hours, the Russian FA challenging the idea had been thrown out of the various tournaments and competitions. I have to say it was the moment, and there wasn't a huge semblance of sympathy before that, but you could understand an argument that said, listen, it's not, you know, the football team or the Paralympics team or any of the rest that are at the forefront of this stuff. But I have to say that was the moment for me that I lost any semblance of an idea that they were just caught up in all this. I think that if you don't understand from a Russian football union point of view as to why you've been to be thrown out of those tournaments, and you decide to appeal all that through the courts in the shadows of your country, bombing innocent people into oblivion, I think that you really have, to put it very mildly, failed to read the room and deserve everything you get. And the idea that it's going to be trawled through the courts now in the shadow of everything that's gone on is really desperate. You wonder, have they no shame at all? Have they no sense at all of self-awareness? They could have had the opportunity, obviously, to stand with the many brave Russians who've taken to the streets to protest against what's going on over the border, and to set some sort of an example by saying fair cop, but they've obviously turned down all of that. And it does lead us back to the name that we brought up in last week's show. Alexander Zhukov, president of the Russian Football Union, is the common denominator across all of this. He's also, as we discussed, on the Gazprom board, serves on the executive committee of UEFA since April of last year, and you can be absolutely certain that that's the direction that all this has been driven from. And Russia now also saying that they're appealing their exclusion from the Paralympics. Some interesting stuff about it, and indeed some quotes in the Irish Times this morning in relation to the whole situation. And it's just desperate, and I think that from a sports point of view in Russia, you just at this point have to say fair cop and take your medicine and get on with it. And it's one of many interesting developments in the world of football over the last 24 hours.
Like it is interesting you say that there's almost like a situation of a mask slipping in certain situations. I'm not sure was there much of a mask that could have been slipped yesterday, but I'm sure people will have seen this at the Financial Times Business of Football Summit. There's been a lot of extraordinary detail in the course of a few hours of action at this thing yesterday. The most striking, particularly in the context of Russia and Roman Abramovich's soon to be ended ownership of Chelsea. Amanda Staveley was saying that we're always going to have geopolitical issues. I'm really sad that someone is going to have a football club taken away because of a relationship he may have with someone. I don't think that's particularly fair, to be honest, which is a quote that kind of blew up naturally online. And as I say, I'm not necessarily sure if the mask slipped at all in this situation, because this is somebody with who worked on behalf of an investment fund, of course, not necessarily a government, but an investment fund that did have quite close ties with the Saudi Arabian government. She did reiterate yesterday that the PIF was separate from the Saudi state, and she said that we should always be held to task. One thing we showed when doing the Premier League ownership test was that there was separation. We and the PIF run the club with autonomy. So Amanda Staveley, I mean, I just don't understand why she would come out and say such a thing at such a time as well. It's like, not that there was an amazing time to come out and say that, but it just is astonishing, really, and kind of not reading the room whatsoever. And potentially, when you think about who was in the room and the other football officials, maybe she did actually feel like a sense of comfort in actually talking like this in terms of who was in there, like on a kind of on a lesser scale of importance. Yesterday, there were some other really interesting, like, football political developments at this Business of Football Summit. You had Andrea Agnelli and you had Alexander Seferin, obviously at the very opposite ends of the spectrum when it came to the European Super League early last year, both contributing to this thing. You had Agnelli, who was pro Super League, of course, who was still pro Football League, Super League, I should say. He said European football is in dire straits and it is in need of deep and profound reforms. And then he denied that the Super League was a failure last year, and he said the unsustainability of the industry is still there, pointing to large financial losses faced by top clubs across the continent. So Agnelli is trying to get the zombified version of a Super League in at some point or another. At the same time, you have you had Seferin hitting out at the possibility that it could be revived, saying first they launched their nonsense idea in the middle of a pandemic. Now we're reading articles every day that they're planning to launch another idea in the middle of war. They obviously live in a parallel war and parallel world, I should say, and they were kind of in the same room while discussing that, or certainly Seferin was beaming in via Skype. And then at the end of it all, you had UEFA dropping, I guess, finer details of their great Champions League plan for 2024-25, which looks curiously like the Super League.
Yeah, and it seems like they're going to ditch the idea of the World Cup every other year as well. We might come back to that a little bit later in the show. It's 10 to 8. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. We're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. Here's what's coming up. Ronan O'Gara standing by to talk all things rugby. Alan Foran is going to be with us. He's just launched a brand new podcast on the Go Loud app. And we'll be talking to Impressionist Al just after 10 this morning. 8:30, we'll let you know what's happening in the world of live sport. And a little bit later on, we've got our quick picks for the GAA weekend ahead. Nicole Kozlova is a Canadian-born Ukraine international who's playing her club football in Denmark, and she's going to join us live on the line to talk about events in that part of the world, the impact on her and on her family from 9 this morning. Brian Kerr will be with us live on the line. He's back at live Premier League football, I think for the first time since the pandemic kicked off. That's just about 9:20 this morning. He's at the Manchester Derby the weekend, so we talked to him about that. We'll touch on League of Ireland as well. And Eddie Brennan was on with Nathan last night, so that is from 9:30 this morning. But yeah, do keep your comments coming into us. Plenty of reaction to our chat off the top of the show. 10 to 8, Ronan O'Gara, good morning to you.
Hey Adrian, how are you on?
How are you getting on?
Good, very well, yeah, thank you.
We'll talk a little bit about the Six Nations. Want to get your thoughts on the power ranking almost of the various out halves in the tournament, and we might do that in a couple of moments' time. But we might just start with we were chatting to you, it struck me we were chatting to you last week about the onslaught that you had from the previous week in the last 5 or 10 minutes of the game, and you managed to hang on. It was kind of a reverse of that, was it, against Poe last weekend? Was it a couple of points down with 5 minutes to go?
Yeah.
Came back to win it?
Yeah, point down. Well, we were 14-6 up, I think, before that. So conceded a try, 14-13, conceded a penalty, 16-4. No, the maths doesn't add up. We were, I think, a point down anyway. And we got a good scrum penalty. Ohio West kicked a good penalty, and then we scored a try to make it 6 points and a conversion to come in a favourable position, but we missed that. So 6 point lead away from home in the top 14 game is beyond dangerous. So we had to scramble. What was very pleasing was the fact that we controlled and we played probably our best rugby in the last 10 minutes when we were under pressure. So we finished the game strongly. We finished in their 22, so thankfully we, I suppose, controlled possession and took the element of doubt and the crowd and the referee out of the game. So that was quite pleasing. But on to brief tomorrow. It keeps going. There's a crazy, I suppose, league going on in France this year. There's so many teams that can potentially make top 6, and for the first time ever in the history, I think Toulouse lost 6 games in a row, and over the 100-year history of the Bouclier. So anything is possible. So it's the 80 minutes, Adrian, really that counts. So you're trying to, just because you play at home tomorrow doesn't mean that you're going to get the result, that you're going to be performing. So there's huge interest in the championship this year. Has it settled down for you? Like we haven't chatted to you in a while about the overall your role and how everything's going on that front. Have you found it settled down? Are you into a rhythm of things now? To call it a new role feels inappropriate, but no, gone the other way.
How so?
It's just, I suppose, it's just the depth of work involved, I think, in terms of 40 odd players and 25 staff. So that's usually means that there's an issue with at minimum 5 people. So you're just dealing with that a lot, and then you're trying to concentrate on probably what you enjoy is trying to get the best out of the players. And so it's huge learnings, yeah, most definitely. But
there's not enough time left for that, I presume, is the point, is it?
No, because then that's you're making an excuse. You have to make time for it. That's the reality, and the players have to see you in good form and fresh. And I suppose, the minute I go in, I either give them energy or I take energy away from them. So that's important for me as a leader. And I think there's just, I suppose, so many things. It's consistency of behaviours that fascinates me. There are days where you're just kind of going, oh, this is getting too much for me, but you just got to keep going. And then there's days like in Poe away where you have a bus journey and you remember why you loved rugby so much in the first place. So it's just trying to find that. There's a bedding in period, most definitely, and probably establishing where the club wants to go, needs to go, as opposed to a club with a Pro D2 history, as opposed to going into a Toulouse, a Clermont, a Racing, with, I suppose, established history and firepower behind them. So it's really, really exciting. It's really interesting, and it's tiring, but it's brilliant.
When you're in those moments where you think it's too much for you, is there a certain trigger that you have? Is there a certain thing that you do to try and snap yourself out of it as quickly as possible?
Yeah, there's plenty of, I suppose, tools available, personal tools or personal methods that you just, I suppose, that you have to take a breath and you have to take time and you have to, I suppose, kind of get back on task. And for that, there is a process, there's a procedure, and if I was to reveal that, it would give away what I do to the players. I'm not going to mention that this morning.
You take it out on them, is that what you're saying?
No, not at all. No, but you just have to, it keeps probably coming back to the model of who gives energy to the project and who takes energy from the project. And then you have to remind yourself that there are so many good people. So let's inspire these people and let's get these people where they need to be, as opposed to spending all your time with people that want to take energy away from the project.
It must be annoying at times, though, being like, geez, I wish I was just in the
Correct.
background.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd be a liar if you said otherwise.
Draining, like.
Yeah, exactly. But I think that's the reward of getting involved in sport. I think that's what's, I suppose, gives you all those emotions and drive for wanting to achieve something. But yeah, it can be draining, but that's a weak reason to stop doing what you believe in. So you commit to it and you give it your best shot, and then if it's not good enough, then you put your hand up. But there are days when it's so easy, and then there are other days you feel you're doing exactly the same thing and you're banging your head against the wall. But it's nothing different really to being a top class goal kicker in that regard as well. Technically, physically, mentally, you feel like you're doing exactly the same prep and the ball is going one way, and then you just wish you knew why, but you don't. I think that that's what experience tells you, is that when you have bad days, that your bad days are, a 6 or a 7 out of 10 as opposed to a 2 or 3 out of 10. And for me, it's the same in coaching. I think you just got to be really true to your behaviours or to your philosophy or to what you believe and how the game should be played. And if that's, I suppose, the message you get across and your players buy into that, then it becomes really powerful.
It's raised an interesting question about Munster and the fork in the road there at Ronan. Like Graham Rowntree obviously is there. There are some indications coming now that they'll go back down the director of rugby route over the next while, and that maybe Graham Rowntree finds himself in a head coach position. How important is it in the context of what you've been doing? Obviously, how important is it for him then to have people around him who he knows or he trusts, or people with some experience, I suppose?
Yeah, very, very important, because that's hugely crucial. The head coach or the director of rugby doesn't do all the coaching, so the alignment between assistant coaches and medical team and strength and conditioning team is hugely, hugely important. And players are very, very smart and intelligent and capable of, I suppose, of reading the language of the staff. So if they were to decipher or interpret a breakdown within one of the divisions of the building, they'd go to town on it, and they would jump on that and use it as a potential reason to not give 100%. So that's one of the, I suppose, the basic components in trying to get a high performing model, is that you have alignment throughout I suppose all your departments. So be it Munster, be it La Rochelle, be it Leinster, be it Ulster or Connacht, it's hugely, hugely important that you have, I suppose, harmony and cohesion between those people.
there's some chat that there's a Graham Rowntree, former forwards coach with Georgia, Jed McNamara, who's at Munster, worked with Georgia before, and Milton Haig, who I think might have recently left his position there, but they would have worked together. Like, there'd be a familiarity about that. There's some indication that maybe that's the direction Munster are headed in. Would that familiarity again be an important aspect in terms of that relationship between director of rugby? Because obviously there are other, Declan Kidney's been mentioned as well, but that familiarity bit, Ronan, for Rowntree, if it was to go that route?
Yeah, I think so, because the last thing you want, no matter how experienced you are or confident you are, is I suppose the issue of uncertainty or unknown from your assistants when you start a job. That's why plucking a guy from the outside and putting him in with coaches that he's never worked with before, no matter what age or how experienced you are, is a risk, because within 3 months, I mean, you can have a few pre-meetings and meetings and going, yeah, I think I get a good feel out of this will work, but it's only when you kind of have 3 results or negative results in a row, you find out what the real character of the person is and how they react to pressure. So it's always better, I think, to I suppose, engage in a project when you know who you're working with. Can it work the other way? It can, but it probably takes a lot of time. So there'll be a longer bedding in period, and then maybe in the year, probably 2 or 3, you're probably establishing how we operate and how we get the best out of each other. But in sport, that's quite a long time in certain regards. But I think the key for Munsters, probably it would be great to have, I suppose, a project of solidity where it can take off with the right people involved.
Yeah, Milton Haig was a name I have to admit I had to Google. In rugby circles, is he known, spoken about?
Yeah, he would be. Yeah, he's on the circuit a long time. He's a good reputation and a competitor. And Graham Rowntree is a smart guy and very, very proven. So I think if that's the road they're going, it's very, very important that it's Graham's staff as opposed to Munster's staff.
We'll watch with interest, obviously, over the next while. Six Nations, bit of a break week this week, back into England next weekend. Paul O'Connell had some interesting stuff to say yesterday about England being on the verge of a big result. It almost felt, because Eddie Jones is under some pressure, obviously, with the 2 big games to come, it almost felt like Paul was kind of talking to the players as much as anything, his own players as much as anything. In the sense of, he was saying basically England, don't be getting too carried away with the idea that Eddie Jones is under too much pressure or that England are a bad team, that with Ireland and France to come, that they obviously still have the possibility of winning this thing.
Yeah, and people have short memories too. I think, the team that was in the World Cup final was England. That's the biggest tournament where in the world game the teams judge each other on. So I was actually in the stadium for England-New Zealand semi-final in Japan. What a game. And the guys in the white jerseys were unbelievably impressive. That it was a 5 o'clock kickoff, I think, that evening. So it was interesting just to see, I suppose, tactically how they took New Zealand apart, just by kind of varying their point of attack and playing width and speed and tempo in their game and being really good at the ruck, and just they were hugely deserving winners. It was by far the better team. So that's obviously a few years ago now, but I think what you can't question with Eddie Jones is that I think he gets his timing right. So England would be ready for Rugby World Cup 2023 in Paris. Or in France. That's for certain. I think he's having a look about whether he can do it without the Vinopolos or not at the minute. I think at any stage they could come back into the team. And it's the two of them, Farrell, Tuolagi. I think for me it becomes a very, very different English team. But, I think England and Twickenham is always, I think no matter who you are, when England play in Twickenham, I would apply for the Irish game, I would say England would be favourites.
All right. Is there an evolution? Sandy Farrell said after the Italy game, he was asked about the English stuff and he was talking about like almost tongue-in-cheek about New England, in the sense that I think he was saying basically they're still that kind of kicking team. Are you are you seeing anything new about them, or if so, what?
I think when you look at them, I think they aren't as accurate as they have been in previous campaigns, and I think it's very understandable because they probably have in Marcus Smith a 10 who's, I suppose, likes taking risks, as opposed to traditionally the English 10 in a Wilkinson Farrell mode would be very, I suppose, not risk averse, but very, I suppose, percentage orientated, and exiting their half very well. Really strong kicking game and a really big focus on a set piece. Marcus Smith, I suppose, comes to life in the unstructured play. He would be very interesting outside Dupont in a blue jersey, I would think, in terms of how he plays the game. So I think in that regard, you have probably a free spirit at 10 who plays, I suppose, in a more liberated system in Harlequins. Going into England and Test rugby is different, and you have to, I suppose, understand that it takes a little bit more time and more accuracy and more skill to break down Test defences. But what we've seen in his infancy is that he's very, very adept at doing that. And I think it's just, I suppose, for me, they're lacking a little bit of cohesion. Ireland are probably further down the road in their establishing how they want to play the game. But England, I suppose, with the profile of player they have when they have a full deck, are very, very dangerous.
It's interesting that you mentioned there that he's a bit different to Johnny Wilkinson, because Wilkinson's been working a little bit with Marcus Smith on the mental techniques and I guess the actual kicking technique as well. Is that a good coaching idea to get somebody involved with a player whose natural instinct, I guess, is different to that player?
Yeah, that'd be very interesting to see what the brief is on. If it's for kicking, mental skills around the kicking, then Johnny was incredibly, I suppose, incredibly well taught or well informed on the subject. So in that regard, I think, for understanding, I suppose, the principles of striking the ball and all that, then Johnny is the man for that. If you're looking at probably the phase game or the attack game, I think Marcus Smith might be more suited to the fact that I think his biggest strength is I suppose his instincts.
I'm trying to read between the lines of some of the stuff you're saying, and maybe if we ask it slightly differently, then if you were picking a team, right, let's say a Lions team to include all the teams in the Six Nations, who's your starting 10 from the Entamac, Sexton, Bigger, and let's say Smith is the other option there?
And when is the Test match?
I knew you were going to start asking me, what's the pack? Who are they playing? What sort of style are you going for? Forgetting all that.
Well, it's obviously important. I think Johnny is coming to the end of a glittering career.
If they're playing now, like they're playing, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would probably it's Sexton, Smith, Entamac, Russell.
In that order?
Yeah, if you're playing a Test match tomorrow, Johnny is still good enough to play a Lions Test match tomorrow. I think he's come back very well from disappointment and not going on that trip. I think that was a hammer and blow for him, and I think that's what competitors do. They respond and they kick on, and judging by his performance against, I suppose, with Wales and Italy, that it'll be up 2 or 3 notches against England and Scotland, that's for sure. But I think, knowing the competitor he is, for that, Smith isn't anywhere near the finished product. Russell, we can talk about that. in depth, but you can see exactly why the difference between having control of your players and not. So the Sunday night before the Saturday game, France-Scotland, Finn Russell was in Bordeaux at 9 o'clock, kicking off for Racing against Bordeaux. So 9:50 half time, 10:05 start the second half, 11 p.m. finished the game, into the dressing room, shower, probably on the bus at 12:30, 1 a.m. To the airport, 2 a.m. flight to Paris, 3:30. As a flight to Scotland at 9 a.m. Do you sit it out for the 4 hours in the airport, or depending on what airport you are in Paris as well, or do you go home and an hour's ride in the taxi and then a 2 hour sleep back into the taxi to get the flight to get to Edinburgh Monday, where all your teammates are already in camp and have had the weekend off. So I think the biggest learning or thing of interest going forward for me is that France are going to be more and more dangerous as the years go by, and obviously as the campaign goes on, because all the French players are resting in between games, while you look at Finn Russell and you look at Stuart Hogg. One goes to Exeter, one goes to Racing, and they're playing games mentally and physically. It's just too much of a disadvantage. You look at Finn getting criticised in his game against in the game against France, but sure, the guy is sleepwalking around the pitch, and that can happen. And I think that's why the big difference for the IRFU and for the French team now, because they've done a deal with the clubs, it's going to be very, very hard to get guys. If you're playing Saturday, you can say it's only a club game. Club games in France are desperately difficult, mentally and physically, because of the size of the people playing the game. You've 130, 40 kg back rows, second rows, front rows in a Bordeaux Racing game, and that just takes its toll on people that are playing. And then you go into camp and everyone is full of energy and you're dead after playing on Saturday, and then you have to go play a test match the following weekend. So it'll be I think that it would be interesting to see what happens with Rule 9 in terms of when actually this protection of players kicks in. Yeah,
context is everything. Ronan, thanks a million.
Cheers, lads. See you.
Ronan
Have a good weekend.
You too. Ronan O'Gara on the line there from La Rochelle. Interesting stuff. Good context to the Finn Russell stuff, because he was getting hammered on, wasn't he, after the stuff last weekend? And you don't think about that stuff that he's talking about.
No.
In that moment.
You're under an absolute magnifying glass in the Six Nations. It becomes a situation where your one performance is kind of discussed and picked apart for sometimes weeks on end, especially around that weekend when it's a week in the build-up and a week in the aftermath before you have another game, and it just feels all important. And even outside of that, you've got 5 games where everybody is watching you. Everybody's watching you, and it just feels that obviously for his club and all that, there would be a situation where there'll always be next week, and there'll also be just far from a magnifying glass placed upon your performances.
Wouldn't you think the Scottish Union would give him a private jet? Genuinely.
Yeah.
What would it be? I don't know. 4 or 5 grand. I'm not sure. But
you'd imagine if it's a significant deal on how he's performing, then Gregor Townsend is surely.
Somebody sits down with the logistics and said, this guy's going to have to play, make that journey to Paris, wait overnight, get the plane the next morning. No, let's just bring him in that night.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a good idea.
It's 13 minutes past 8. It's Friday morning. You're watching the OTB AM. We're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. A lot still to come here in the show. We're going to be speaking to the Ukrainian footballer Nicole Kozlova about the situation unfolding in their country. She's Canadian born, playing her trade in Denmark at the minute, and we'll speak to Nicole a little bit later this morning. Brian Kerr is going to be with us ahead of the Manchester Derby at the weekend. GAA quick picks to come, and up next chatting to impressionist Al Foran about his new podcast.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio.
The football pod on OTB Sports.
I don't think Dublin are going to be right in time. I think if it was the old season, I would still be very worried about Dublin, but I just can't see them getting right in time for it. Mayo, Kerry, Tyrone.
Who plays Mayo in the final? I told you, the Dubs are timing it for the All-Ireland final.
Get the hop on everyone else and hear the Football Pod first on the OTB Sports app every Tuesday. For the latest on GAA, rugby, football and much more, download the OTB Sports app, turn on push notifications and hear it here first.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance PLC.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
Fred and McTominay get a hard time. Fair enough, they may not be the quality of midfielder of Manchester United of 10, 15, 20 years ago, but in terms of effort, in terms of actually when Manchester United playing well, them playing well, there's other targets you could pick than Fred and McTominay.
Yeah, there is, and it's a fair comment, but you said 10, 20, 30 years ago, and it's one of the biggest clubs in the world. When you've had Roy Keane in that position and Brian Robson in that position, there's going to be comparisons with those great players. You look at the fullbacks, they're good fullbacks, but other clubs have got better fullbacks because in the Premier League now the bar has been raised very high because of the money. Most of the clubs can go out, they can scout globally. So Manchester United cannot pick off the best talents from even clubs like Tottenham, like they used to be able to do, going to sign Michael Carrick or Teddy Sheringham. It doesn't happen like it used to do. So a gap has been closed in other ways. And I think Fred, he said it last week, he's not the most technical of players, but he does have his virtues and he has some decent matches, and then he infuriates fans by giving the ball away. And the central midfield has been an area where Manchester United have been looking to improve upon. That's why you've seen Declan Rice linked to Manchester United all of the time. And it's just another area where there's been concern. I think 6 games into this season, when the mood was very different, when Manchester United were at the top of the league, a central midfielder would have been the one position which players were looking at. Now I think you're looking at trying to strengthen all over the pitch, which is not going to happen. You can't just get rid of a whole squad, but that shows the frustration and how underwhelming a lot of the players have been this season.
That's Andy Minton from United We Stand in conversation with Nathan on the football show last night. You can listen back to the full chat. It's in the OTB Football Podcast feed. Now, it is 17 minutes past 8. It's Friday morning. There's still loads to come. Brian Kerr on the way to look ahead to the Manchester Derby. Nicole Kozlova as well, a Ukrainian international footballer based in Denmark, will talk to us just after 9 this morning, and plenty more as well. So do keep your comments coming into us. But before all of that, this week, Go Loud announced the launch of Goalmouth, Al Foran's Football Forum, a Go Loud original podcast. You can see it there on your screen. A new episode every Tuesday where you can expect unapologetic, biased football opinions. Al Foran, good morning to you.
Good morning, gentlemen. How are we?
So you're leaving you're bringing your United fandom with you behind the mic. Is that what's happening here?
Yeah, no. Listen, it's a brilliant opportunity to be part of the Go Loud roster, and I suppose to have the opportunity to, air my grievances about Manchester United at the moment, as opposed to doing it on Twitter every week. How
long is the podcast?
We're looking at a 45-minute time limit on the podcast. It might stretch to an hour, you know. So, yeah, it's fun, and I suppose my tweets get a lot of engagement, and that's kind of what the guys in Go Loud identified with me starting up this podcast, you know. I talk about Man United a lot on Twitter, and I suppose it's the best way to put it to use is for people to hear my real voice.
Have you
Tuesday? Have you
a sidekick? How are you going to work it? Some sort of a foil?
Yes, we have a co-host, and I suppose it creates a great dynamic. Paddy Murphy, formerly of Rory Stories and massive TikTok following, huge Liverpool fan. So yeah, it creates a great dynamic every Tuesday. But Paddy kind of plays this, you could say, a persona on TikTok as deluded Liverpool fan. But on the podcast, he's fair, he's balanced. You know, he shows a sense of diplomacy every week when talking about Liverpool. He tries not to kind of go into me a little bit about United.
Yeah, he'll have to park that soon enough. That's that reasonableness needs to exit stage left. And so, will you take interactions? Give us a sense of the format?
Well, the format is, we're going to talk about, obviously, there'll be a focus on United every week, and also a focus on what's going on around the Premier League and other leagues as well. Like, I want to include everything. And I suppose you can't do something without me doing my usual spiel. So we have a segment called Famous Faces, where I'll impersonate many different characters from the footballing world and the acting world, the music world, the world of politics, just to kind of, I suppose, get an obscure take on what, say, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino or Mark Wahlberg or Gordon Ramsay think of what's going on in the Premier League or Man United every week as well. So there's that. So that should be a fun element to it.
And come here, it's different, right? Sending out a tweet when you're sitting in your couch and you're hacked off with Ronaldo not making an effort to sitting behind the mic and having given voice to it. Are you apprehensive about that aspect of it, or looking forward to that sort of element of developing the thoughts a bit more, I suppose?
No, I am 100%. I don't want to be too toxic, and I don't want to have too many agendas. When I'm criticising a player, it's coming from the heart. You know what I mean? I don't have any issues with players at the club. I know there's a lot of, you see, there's a kind of a split between fans in Man United. Like, there's a lot of fans that would prefer Pogba over Bruno, or Bruno over Pogba. There's a lot of fans that I was talking just before we came on, Andy Mitten talking about McTominay. There's a lot of fans that don't particularly like McTominay because he's maybe not at the level of a Rodri or a Fabinho. You know, I don't want to kind of bring that in. I don't want any agendas on the podcast.
If you had to put a number of years on it, Al, how many more years of pain do you think you're going to suffer as a Manchester United fan?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, I think we're with the rumours of Ten Hag coming in, I think we're kind of heading towards rebuild number 5.
This is the one.
2013. This is the one, yeah. This is the one. No pun intended, but that was a Stone Roses song. But it's I don't know. I hope in the next year or two things do improve. In the first episode, I was very honest about Ronaldo. I think that was obviously a panic signing, and you know the overall kind of euphoria of him signing for the club back in August is a distant memory. That Newcastle game is also a distant memory, and he's just not cutting it in the Premier League, unfortunately, and that's natural. Age catches up with you, and I think there's kind of an issue up front for United, so they need to address that in the summer transfer window.
Have you met many at the current dressing room?
No, I haven't. Right. I've met a lot of the older players, the ex-players more so.
Are you? I know you're not wanting to lay the boot in here, but like, does Ronaldo get dropped this weekend? Like, given the form he's in, and like no goals. Obviously, it's going very little.
Well, I suppose if Cavani is fit, which I think he is for Sunday, then I would probably go with Cavani over Ronaldo. But he likes to go. He likes to have a holiday every now and then as well. You know, so. It's a huge issue. It's a massive issue, and Martial obviously gone off to Sevilla as well. So,
come here. I'm looking over your shoulder, and it's reminding me of. I think I've seen you during the week. I don't know, was it an old clip hanging out with John Fury?
Yes, yeah. I was put on the spot by Gareth Davies to do the John Fury impression in front of the man himself. Yeah, so I was okay. I wasn't
sweaty palms.
I wasn't like Carl Frampton during the week.
What's it? Is there? I mean, outside of the physical presence of somebody that likes John Fury, is there? Are you apprehensive when you're in that company, like, you know, like the Paul Scholes or Gary Neville or whatever it might be? Is that? How do you find all that when you actually get in front of them and they're like, okay, do me now?
Yeah, I'd naturally be very nervous. But I just go with it because I kind of specialise in those kind of one-off videos. If I am in front of a celebrity or anything like that, I will either impersonate them or I'll do a round of impersonations, just talking about whether it's an upcoming match or an upcoming fight or something that they have going on in their lives at the moment. Like I'm kind of, at first I was nervous doing it, but now I'm okay, I suppose.
Are you like, because I can imagine like getting into that sort of company and you're behind the scenes, like, you know, you're there hanging out with them, you're probably wanting to pepper them with a million questions, and they're probably like, come on, perform for me, do that thing. Are you ever like, listen, can we just let's just have a chat? Can we just have a chat here?
Yeah, and that's the funny thing as well. But I've come to a point in my life where I am more comfortable doing those voices than I am being me.
Really?
Professionally. Yeah, well, I suppose like the podcast is another thing, and that I can be Al for, say, 35 minutes, 40 minutes of that podcast, and then 5 minutes is dedicated to the impressions as well. But yeah, I've become so comfortable with that.
Yeah,
unbelievably so. It's crazy. It's a weird old thing.
Like, to the point where you're nearly, like you say, you're sort of happier in that persona almost, like when you're in that company.
No, listen, don't get it confused. I'm not like that in front of, my fiance. And
wake up in the morning. Who am I in bed with this morning? Yeah.
No, my daughter. My daughter is telling me to do Grandpa Pig from Peppa Pig and a few of the Paw Patrol characters. I'm like that for her on a daily basis.
Who's your Paw Patrol? Who's your Paw Patrol number one?
Mayor Goodway.
Oh, Mayor Goodway. Gives a blast to Mayor Goodway. There's plenty of people.
Chickaletta, hello. Where's Ryder in the Paw Patrol?
That's also a huge hit.
And even she loves sing as well. So I was doing the Matthew McConaughey character and sing.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
And yeah, so like, what? Just the last one on those that meeting up. How has anybody taken it badly? Like, I know you're not necessarily overly, like you said earlier on, like, sort of toxic or overly critical of people in that regard, but has anybody taken it badly?
Look, I don't know if he did or not, but I do remember, and it was at the very start of me kind of learning that impression. I did a gig in Manchester for the class of '92, and I did Gary Neville in front of Gary Neville, and it was kind of about, I'd say 10 or 12 tables. And he kind of gave me a little side eye when I did that impression. Wow. And that was it, really. Yeah. Like, I think there was a little chuckle, and there was also a bit of a side eye.
Gary Neville's never been confrontational in a live situation ever before, has he?
No. Yeah.
I guess there's a situation where, like, there's a lot of people of note who you can't really be surprised when they take themselves too seriously, but you are playing with fire a little bit when you go in with that knowledge, I suspect.
I've been lucky enough, that they've taken it well. They've taken it on the chin, which is, which I'm grateful for as well. That's a good thing, I suppose. Hopefully, fingers crossed, touch wood, I don't have an experience like that in the future. I did think I was going to have it with John Fury, but he liked the impression, so thank God for that.
We don't want to let you away without actually tapping into some of that. So what would Gary Neville make of this new podcast, do you think?
Well, I think as well, I think I'll need to tap into the likes of him. He's got to get guests on. You get guests on every week. That's really important when you do the football podcast. You just don't have the likes of myself, Jamie Carragher, or an Eamon Dunphy for that matter, or something like that. You get someone on, get an actor who's a football fan. It's a football fans podcast, primarily for the fans, right?
And come here, Stevie G. Obviously, he's very much back in the game, back on everybody's radar at the minute.
Of course. Great, obviously, you know what I mean. I know Al isn't obviously the biggest fan of me because he's a Manchester United fan, and I know that Paddy, the co-host, is obviously, he worships me, but obviously we're going to talk about Aston Villa, and not in the best of form at the moment, but hopefully that turns around, of course.
Is there I saw you, like, sort of when you're getting into character almost straight away, that there's a physical kind of aspect to it as well, is there?
Yeah, and it's funny as well, you learn the voice, and the mannerisms, they naturally come with learning the voice. You don't. That's like an automatic thing.
Yeah.
It's a weird old process. Like you don't have to. It's not a step-by-step process in learning an impression. It's just the voice, and then the mannerisms just naturally come with it.
What about Harry Redknapp? He's been it kind of disappeared off people's radar. People love him obviously, but he's sort of disappeared off people's radar, hasn't he, a bit?
Oh, well, I don't want to, talk about. I don't want to be on the radar too much. I'm enjoying retirement as well. And the terrific time I had in I'm a Celebrity was fantastic. And it really was. And you guys are great. I watch you guys every morning. You're fantastic. And all the transfer rumours are brilliant. So fantastic.
Good man, Harry. And come here, before we let you off, we better get a word from ahead of the Manchester Derby at the weekend. Is Pep, is he feeling a bit confident about this? It's in the bag really for Pep, isn't it?
Of course we are feeling very confident, because you have to look at the team, Manchester United at the moment. Okay, maybe they are more disciplined since Ralph came in, but we have to win the league. It's very important. We need to go consistent, okay? Because my players, there is no passion. No passion, you know that, lads. There's no passion. The guys, they go out onto the pitch and they are robots, okay? They are my robots. It's like I have a PlayStation controller and I am controlling these players, okay? Good.
Amazing. From Mayor Goodway to Pep Guardiola, I think we've pretty much covered it all off. Listen,
there's a Ralph there as well, if you want.
Go on, who?
There's a Ralph as well to play. You have to do Ralph Rangnick. It's very important for us to play good football. Every Man United manager I've had to learn that's come in. It's important to do that. Okay.
Good man. Listen, fair play. Well done. Great sport. Enjoy the game of the weekend. Best of luck with the podcast.
Thank you very much, lads. Thanks so much.
Good man, thanks a lot. Al Foran there. Goalmouth, Al Foran's Football Forum. It's a Goal Out original podcast. New episodes available every Tuesday, and you can just head along, download the Goal Out app now, and you can pick up, as Al was talking about there, the very first episode, and stay tuned for more to come. Right, we're going to bring you the full chat with Eddie Brennan 9:30 this morning, but before all of that, here he is on the current state of Limerick.
Eddie, that maybe he hasn't got that, because I was listening to the Hurling pod with Paul Murphy and James Skehill, and Paul was talking about the young players that he was bringing in, and that they haven't really proven themselves yet. And are we overestimating the strength and depth of this Limerick squad?
No, I look, if they were good enough to be playing, it's that simple. And it was said about, I suppose maybe our group, it was something that was said once upon a time with us, that there was, and there is equally good fellas there on the bench. But when you're thinking of, you can maybe, whatever, Tom Morrissey's injured someday, or one of your wing backs, and you can drop in a guy. And like I said, he has the comfort of 7 or 8 experienced guys all around him. And that's different. But when there's 4 or 5 of them playing one in each line, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit harder, because, you're now maybe having to step up a little bit more. And yet, you can say maybe they're not ready just yet. But I do think, someone like Colm O'Neill is plenty good enough. I think he has shown that. And I do think, the point I want to make there, I suppose the equally important one, is there are certain fellas, obviously, too, within that Limerick team. You have obviously 15 very strong guys and a couple of good lads on the bench that they have. But there's certain guys within that core then that they just can't be without. And I think Cian Lynch, maybe, Declan Hannon with the 2 guys, Burns and Hayes either side of them, having, certain guys there, they provide leadership. They take the pressure off maybe other lads there. So I think what you're seeing is that if certain guys aren't in certain positions, definitely there's a vulnerability about them.
That full chat with Eddie Brennan is coming your way 9:30 this morning, and also, if that doesn't suit you, you can get the thing in full on the OTB GAA feed, on our podcast network, and on YouTube as well. Tommy Welch on the Hurling pod with James Skehill and Paul Murphy will be available there as well. The football pod with James O'Donoghue and Paddy Andrews. Final episode of the Club Championship show available there as well. You'll get both the Gaelic football and hurling power rankings as well, and also an interesting chat from during the week with Joe, in conversation with Jason Sherlock and Malachy Turkamore, that we're talking about fly goalkeepers and the value of them, or not, I suppose, as might have been the case last weekend. So that is all available on the OTB GAA feed. Let's give you a bit of a sense of what's happening on the back pages this morning, starting with OTBSports.com. They must wonder how we're producing these keepers, says Gavin Cooney, who was in with Nathan on the football show last night. That conveyor belt of keepers certainly keeps on giving. Graham McDowell provides a Ryder Cup update on the Ryder Cup captaincy. Basically, he doesn't want it yet. He doesn't want to go toe-to-toe with Zach Johnson. He's still got a chance of playing, I'd say he believes, so he's opting out. Maloney and Nupu miss out on the Ireland Six Nations squad, and Russia confirming appeal to the Court of Arbitration for Sport over FIFA and UEFA expulsion. It's also a theme that's taken on across a lot of the back pages this morning. We'll kick off here with the Irish Independent this morning. Eddie's exit ups the ante for Ireland's women's game. And this is the RFU taking some time to look for suitably qualified coaches to replace the departing director, writes Sinead Kassan here, and the fallout from that will continue today. There's a report into Ireland's failure to reach the World Cup, which I think will be published at 12 p.m. today, so it'll be interesting to see the details of that, and I think there's a press conference later on as well. But certainly interesting timing that Anthony Eddy would exit the scene, and also I mentioned the fact that Cliona Maloney and Sonia Nupu weren't involved in haven't been named in the squad in itself. Interesting as well, very critical obviously of the regime when it all flared up last year, so I'm sure there's plenty more to follow on that. And an interview inside with Gordon Elliott as well, by the way. It was a case across a lot of the papers today. It was rough seeing horses leave and staff crying, the words of Gordon Elliott inside. That's the Irish Independent. The Irish Times this morning, Rondon, after his heroics last night for Everton, they managed to beat Boreham Wood in the end 2-0. Couple of late-ish goals, 2 goals in the last half hour. Rondon brings Boreham's fairy tale to an end. Plans to hold biennial World Cup a no-go, says Alexander Seferin, the UEFA president. Lisa Fallon, interesting stuff there. It's not enough for a club to have a women's team. I guess to just have a women's team is the point. There's the Women's National League kicks off, the SSE Electricity Women's National League kicks off tonight, and the point being that we're sort of moving beyond the stage of just having a National League, that there probably has to be something a bit more with a bit more depth to it than just ticking the box. That she speaks about the great coverage that the Cup final had last year, and that there needs to be just a bit more of that essentially. Irish Daily Murphy this morning, Stars and Stripes, US tycoon Bowley now in pole position to buy Chelsea after Premier Chief tells Abramovich his reign was unsustainable, and plenty more inside there as well on that. We have the London Times League plan to fast track Chelsea's sale. Sanctions hit Everton hard. This is obviously the continuing fallout of Alisher Usmanov's involvement. That is the Times for you there. A couple more that will give you a bit of a flavour of here. The Irish Daily Star, buy and sell. It says in relation to Chelsea, Abramovich sale of Chelsea could be done in days, as these two businessmen, billionaire businessmen, I think they've got like the guts of 10 billion quid between them, Bowley and his Swiss counterpart as well, so we'll see how that pans out over the next few days as well. That is the Star for you. The Irish Daily Mail, Cup price Chelsea, Swiss tycoon and LA Dodgers owner want the club for less than £2 billion. Pressure on Abramovich to make quick sale as sanctions threat grows. UK government tells Blues that they will not be hit. And Eddie steps away, writes Rory Keane here. Eddie steps away with RFU report due today. And the last one we'll give you here is the Irish Sun this morning. It's unfair on Rom. This was the details of the story that Owen was mentioning a bit earlier on. Stavely, I'm sad that the club has been taken from him. Billionaire consortium set to bid for the Blues. So, and it certainly seems, listen to fans on some of the fans that were vox popped outside Chelsea yesterday, fans really don't care too much, do they, about that sort of stuff. It's a bit of an inconvenience that they have to be asked about Roman Abramovich's links to Vladimir Putin. By and large, if we could just get on with bringing in huge players, try to win trophies. It's such a race to the bottom in so many ways, because there are not many trophies to go out in any given season. It's largely going to end up in failure for you one way or the other, and that the price you're paying is that you're okay with your club being associated with who now turns out to be an absolute megalomaniac dictator. We're fine with that. I don't know. We will see how it all plays out over the next weeks and months, but it's a conversation that I know we've already had, and I'm sure we'll come back to, but it is grim enough. Right, you're watching OTB AM. We're coming up on 20 to 9. It is Friday morning. We're brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. And a reminder as well, by the way, all the best stuff will be available on the OTB highlights feed, and you can check us out on YouTube and all of those good places as well. We're going to go to quick picks in just a couple of moments' time. We've lots to get into this weekend. I don't really want to talk about what happened last week. I think I've had an absolute whitewash on.
Yeah, to get whitewashed. Last week was a bit of a minefield, to be fair. I see Tommy conveniently took himself out of last week, knowing that there was going to be it was going to be a very tricky week to predict.
Fair point.
Improving his own ratio.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
Which is fine,
Well, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of rumour and rancour, and there's certainly a lot of rancour doing the rounds, but there's some indication that the organiser of the event, the president of the Quick Picks, is going to call a halt to it.
Who's that?
After the league, Tommy.
Oh, why?
He's basically saying that the entire league system is a shambles, and it just needs to be put a bullet in it after the league is done and start afresh for the championship. And to be honest with you, it is not, from the mouth of many ridiculous ideas, it's not the most.
Yeah, no, let's see where we're standing after the league and then make a call on it then.
Right, time for the quick picks.
Some of these critics, these pundits, I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
I'd like to play the hard man when they're on it. It's not very pleasant when you're trying to manage a team. All you're looking for is a bit of civility and a bit of decency, but they just miss you like you have nothing to do with the bloody occasion.
20-9, Aisling, Will, good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
Morning, folks.
Tommy has just made a note here in our production document to say I've butchered the entire league system, to be fair. He's not wrong.
Yeah, this whole thing is an absolute disgrace.
I didn't realise that we're actually not starting afresh come championship.
No, I think we should, Aisling. I think it's the fairest thing to do.
Oh my God, yeah, I definitely, it's a whitewash for me as well. I have not been successful at all, so I would be happy to restart for championship, please.
I'm contractually obliged,
As I recall,
go on,
Adrian,
Will, yeah.
when this went to pot a couple of years ago, we just started adding bonus points and we started adding points for correct predictions and stuff. So
well,
it'll align
you say
itself
went
somehow.
to pot, Will. I say I was in a absolutely uncatchable lead, and then the lads just decided that wasn't going to make enough. That wasn't going to be entertaining enough, so they had to change the rules, and I ended up getting beaten, and that's what happened there. Now, I'm contractually obliged, I think, to mention last week's results. Do we have we something to look at? Hopefully, we do. That's the overall standings. At least that's not so bad. And its own, even with the paltry 59%.
Yeah, well, I think I only got two correct predictions last week out of whatever it was, 8 or something like that. So my average has come down considerably.
It feels like that there's been a lot of rogue results. Is that me sort of?
No, I'd say it's probably
being kind to my 37% there.
We just have no clue, to be honest. We're a bunch of clowns. We don't know anything. I think that's probably closer to the.
I think that's a good way to set up this item. Right, let's have a look at what we've got lined up for you this week. We're going to start with Cork Galway, Division 1A, Páirc Keeve, and it is Cork across the board. I mean,
like, these are always images that precede unfortunate events. These whitewashes.
A part of mine was like listening to Will O'Callaghan on yesterday's AM, and there was no other way to go, Will, after listening to your Sermon on the Mount on behalf of the good people of Cork.
Yeah, don't back down, double down. If you're going to go with them and say that they're in form, it would have been very silly if I turned around and went, hey, Cork have been so impressive in their first 3 games, but Galway are going to go to Páirc Keeve and beat them. Yeah, I mean, this is game of the weekend in Division 1A, with no disrespect to Clare and Limerick, which we'll probably talk about in a few moments' time as well. But Galway have to show a little bit of a response from the way that they played against Wexford last week, which is a bit disappointing on the back of having to gone to the Gaelic grounds and won just before the break, while Cork are the latest team to go and beat Limerick at home in the league so far this year. For Cork, there's an incentive to basically book themselves into the league semi-finals if they were to beat Galway this week at Páirc Keeve, and they'll want to show that they can back up particularly the first half performance that they put in against Limerick last time out. So I think Cork are just motoring a little bit better than Galway at the moment, but welcome along all of you to Galway supporters tweeting you if Galway win at Páirc Keeve this weekend, because I've been enduring this for a few weeks now.
Like, I guess it'll be just a double whammy, because you're in the hurling power rankings sort of crosshairs as well, Will. But like, I think there's reason. Like, I mean, we're not just all. It's not just a coincidence that this show has like gone all of Cork. I think that there's real tangibles, and then there's also the intangibles of Cork not having won the league, I think now for 24 years at this point. There's like a real incentive for them to actually be like, okay, well, we might like get our hands on the All Ireland. We have to start somewhere. If there's going to be a red wave coming, there might not be a bad place to start in the National League over the next little while. So I think that they're really gunning for this at the moment. Like, obviously there's been a lot spoken on the hurling pod and elsewhere as well about Mark Coleman and him slotting into centre back this year, which has been the most important position for Cork, certainly when they were picking through the wreckage of last year's All-Ireland hurling final. And then you look at the Galway side of things, and while they are going well, and they make a couple of like encouraging changes this week, like it'll be good to see Conor Whelan in the attack. They do have the likes of Gavin Lee, who's coming into start, who was playing for Presentation Athenry just on Monday night. So they're trying out youth. There's certainly a bit more of an experimental feel to Galway at the moment than there is to Cork, who look like that they're going out to win this entire thing. Did you agonise Aisling, or was it clear enough for you?
Yeah, it was a bit of a tough one. I think Cork, they started like a train, 3 wins out of 3. I think last week's performance was probably the really dominant performance when they bet Limerick. And that was just 6 months, after that All-Ireland, and 16 points they lost that day. So Galway, on the other hand, then I just saw, they'll be disappointed after being beaten by Wexford, but they're a team that are on the rise at the minute. And just listening to Henry Shefflin speaking after the game, he was saying that people might have got carried away a bit with their first 2 performances, but then after Sunday, they know where they're at now. They know what work they need to do, and it's no harm to be losing games. I don't think in the league, you're going to learn a lot. You're going to work on things for championship. It can only be positive. So I do think it's going to be seriously close, but I think Cork, with the form they're in at the minute, Páirc Uí Chaoimh, I just think, they're going to edge it.
Okay. I think I heard Henry behind you there, Will. What's his name? What's the dog?
Tank, yeah.
Tank.
Would you believe, right? I've hidden every single toy that makes the squeaky noise, and somehow in the time that my back has been turned to go on to chat to you guys, he's managed to find the squeaky.
Well, it was just when you made that point about Cork, I think he was like, listen, well, come on.
I think he was like, Conor Whelan's back. Don't be underestimating Galway this weekend.
Do you know what we do? If there's another washout this week, we'd be better off getting Hank the Tank and 2 balls and put food in each of those and just teeing it up with the other way, Paul the Octopus style.
You can take my spot.
Don't rule this content out, Owen.
That would be good, actually. I would actually genuinely watch that.
Dublin Kilkenny 1B, Parnell Park. Let's have a look, and it's Dublin across the. I'm really surprised, I have to say, on both of these that we've both all gone in. Like, and I
hope down a Kilkenny win now.
Well, that's exactly the point. That, like, I think maybe with both of these games, you're not going to be overly astonished with if it swings the other way. And like, to be honest with you, I'd written Kilkenny down, and I thought, I actually thought that's too obvious and it's too easy. And given the basis of what happened last weekend, that surely, this is a better indicator of where this Dublin team are at, Aisling, and like that. When in Tipperary as well, it must be said, it is a good recommendation.
Oh, massive, yeah. Dublin are definitely a team from the last 2 years that I've been really impressed with. They're really exciting players, look like a team that's very much been developing, trying to find their style, and I think things are just clicking for them at the moment, and they're definitely on the way up. An unbeaten start, 2 wins, a draw, and as you said, getting that win in Semple Stadium last weekend, they're going to take a lot of confidence from that. On the other hand, you have Kilkenny, who had no trouble against Laois to get back on track. They had 1 point defeat then to Tipperary the previous week, and I think you can never write off Kilkenny. They're always finding their feet, getting more and more players back into the team. And I think Brian Cody, he was speaking as well after the game, and he just said they're a team they want to try and settle and form a team coming up to championship. So that threw me a little bit, thinking, okay, they might be they might edge this one, but then I was thinking Parnell Park, the form Dublin are in. So I do think it's going to be extremely close. It was a tough one. I went back and forth, but in the end, I went for Dublin, just about. Yeah,
Saturday nights under lights. I don't know, quite lights at 5 o'clock. Well, is
different form lines, Adrian?
Go again.
For this one, so there's 2 very different form lines for this one. Kilkenny have won the 2 games that they would have been expected to win in Division 1B, so they got over the line against Antrim and they kind of pulled away a little bit, despite the fact they finished the game of 14 men against Laois, lost them out. So they're 2 games they would have expected. They kind of got edged out against a Tipperary team where both sides are very clearly in transition and trying to change what they're doing. This is the most difficult game they've had in the league so far, is going to a Dublin team on the back of what they did at Semple Stadium last week, where I thought they put a really good defensive performance in and had a really good defensive shape. With the exception of Jake Morris, who played really well for Tipperary, they kept some key players quiet, including Jason Ford for Tipperary last week. Dublin have got this interesting formation out of the ball when they don't have the ball as well, particularly in opposition puckouts, where they go in a straight line. They create almost an eye, and then the idea is once they get the ball, they spread it out into wide positions and there's loads of space for players to run into. They've hit the season running. They've put in some really good results so far and some very good performances. And as a result, I think he got it back where Dublin are at this stage in the league compared to Kilkenny. As much as people say Kilkenny are in the long grass and all that kind of stuff. Also with Kilkenny, they're probably going to have their 2-star young players from Ballyhale Shamrocks back for this week in Cody and Mullen, but we know that TJ Reid is still away. So Kilkenny are a few weeks before they get back, I think, to full tilt again. And as a result, I'm back in Dublin to win in consecutive weeks here.
Frank the Tank is not disagreeing with that.
What's he got?
He's all over it. He hears Dublin, he's loving it.
There could be a situation, Adrian, where, you know, in a little while people will just love to get one over the Dublin hurlers as well as the Dublin footballers. It'll be, you know, a sense of retribution for all the havoc that this Dublin hurling team is going to cause this year. Like, they were excellent last week, even though I think a lot of us thought that their win was going to come to an end. So all of a sudden, in the space of one game, I'm certainly gone from thinking that this is maybe early season kind of not an early season flash, and I think it's actually going to be something far more sustainable. I think that there's a chance that this thing is like a Dalo level of a blue wave coming in this Dublin team over the next little while. We'll see what happens this summer, obviously, before we get that. But even when you're looking at sort of like tangibles, obviously playing in Parnell Park is going to be a big thing. Owen O'Donnell last week was really good on Shamie Callanan, and I think whoever he's going to be on this week is probably going to be in for a tough enough evening. So that's probably a couple of the things that you'll be looking at for Dublin this week. But I'm looking at all of us just going for Cork and for Dublin, and given that we got 2 out of 10 or 2 out of 8 last week at best, this is going to be a very, very tough weekend. Stay off Twitter.
Most of my picks were based on the fact that I thought you schmucks were all going to go a different direction. So that's I'm very disappointed now. And actually, listen to Will. I nearly want to change my pick because I thought, Will, despite picking Dublin, most of your recommendation there was for Kilkenny, to be honest with you. But reading between the lines, we'll see how it all pans out. And Owen, I have to say, in fairness to yourself, like, there's nothing worse than if you've backed a team. You don't need to, if it turns out to be the wrong call, then the right thing to do is what you're doing, and jump ship, get behind the new cause.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what the reference is there, but
it's
I
endorse
that message.
It's always a reference to Kildare football somewhere along the line. Right, moving on. Clare Limerick, Ennis 1:45 start on Sunday. Limerick across the board. We've got one standout here with Owen is going for Clare, so lead the way.
Look, I mean, I know why people have gone for Limerick. I mean, they have played each other already this year. Limerick won by 9 points. I think that game was in Cusack Park as well. And you did have Brian Lohan coming out after the game, and he was saying they're certainly not going backwards in their professionalism, the quality of players that they have, great resources. Most hurling people will accept that they are the standard at the moment. There was almost a resignation to Lohan's comments after getting beaten by 9 points against the same opposition just at the end of January, I think it was. So have things narrowed enough between then and now? We'll find out this weekend. But I just think, like we've been backing against the Dubs over the last little while, you back against a team that are out of form. And I know that's where, if you're looking for form teams at the moment, you're looking at you're looking at Cork and Dublin, you're not necessarily looking at Clare. But I think Limerick have been out of sorts so far. It doesn't matter. It's not going to matter come the summer, but it's going to matter for this weekend, I think. And I think that if we're picking on form and we're picking on home advantage, two things that are very important at this time of year, I think Clare are going to win. So it's a simplistic enough rationale.
Another argument I've listened to, and I feel as if you're making the opposite recommendation, but we'll see. I mean, look, and I take the point. Martin Story was making the same point this week, that the league means absolutely nothing to Limerick. It's about finding a few new players, and it's not, Aisling, essentially a Dublin-style slide here.
Yeah, but it has to mean something in terms of getting a bit of momentum, starting something. Like, they have no wins whatsoever, like seriously struggling. So you have to build some sort of momentum. So I don't believe that it doesn't matter whatsoever. But I thought last week that definitely that was going to be their first win. My prediction was way off. And then they lost to Galway before that. So they just look so disjointed at the minute. Things just haven't clicked. A lot of wides last week. But I have gone for them this week. And I nearly was on the same boat as Owen. I did put down Clare, and then I changed my mind last minute because I just thought, they have to pull things together here. They have to pull something out of the bag. Clare, on the other hand, they have a little bit of a mixed start. They're beaten by Wexford. But then I did think they impressed then against Offaly. So a close call, but I do think that Limerick will edge this win because I feel they actually have to get a performance.
You're all aboard. They're going to come right, Will.
Yeah, look, Jesus Christ went into a desert for 40 days. Limerick have got 40 days to get ready to play Cork in the Championship. That's where we're at this stage. You can almost park everything that's happened so far to Limerick, the 2 defeats, all the talk around the red cards and whether they're now being punished by referees for hand passes and of the kind of edge that was about Limerick in the last couple of years that maybe wasn't punished before. Park all that to one side. Limerick kicked things off in Ennis this weekend with a win. They probably beat Offaly the week afterwards, and people quickly forget, a bit like last year, that Limerick failed to win the first 3 games in the league. If Limerick lose this weekend against a Clare team who've shown very little in the league so far, then you start to get concerned with Cork's form, and just over a month to get ready for that first meeting in the Munster Championship. That's the difference to last year, is the really quick turnaround between the league and Championship. I don't think you can afford to sleepwalk out of the league in the same way that you could have done last year. Unlike Dublin, if you're going to use the direct comparison, Limerick don't really have the concern about relegation that Dublin have currently, where Dublin now need results to stay in Division 1 the league. Like, even if Limerick were to lose every game, and if the unthinkable were to happen and they were to lose to Offaly, which isn't going to happen in a couple of weeks' time, they'd probably still win the relegation playoff against a team from the other side. That danger just isn't there in Division 1 of the Hurling League by comparison. And I think there is definitely going to be a kickback from Limerick. The big thing about last week was that Limerick won the second half against Cork, despite being absolutely dominated in the first half. And I wouldn't agree with Ash's take on Clare either. I think Clare took 50 minutes or so to get going against Offaly and Tullamore. It was a draw game at half-time. They were 1 point down after 50 minutes. Tony Kelly got going, and they managed to beat the weakest team in Division 1 of the league so far. I'm not sure about what we've seen from Clare. I thought they were very poor in Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the opening round of the league as well, and that sets it up perfectly for Limerick to get the first of probably what will be a couple of wins before they come out of the league.
What was he doing in the desert for 40 days? Was there
trying to get out of the desert?
Trying to avoid the devil, as far as
really?
I recall.
Yeah.
Why did he go in there in the first place? Was it to was there like a
heavy night?
Was it? Bit of, was it? He went in around now. Is that what we're celebrating at the minute?
Well, like, I'm just trying to wonder. So, if Limerick managed to win a game while depriving themselves of food and water, and Clare at the receiving end of it, it would.
It's basically what Tyrone did last year with the COVID situation.
They were definitely in the desert for a long time. Yeah.
Waterford, Waterford, Tipperary, Welsh Park, 1:15 on Sunday, and now at last we have a bit of a split here. Aisling, Owen and Will are all taking the obvious route. Waterford and myself and Tommy are going out on a limb here with Tipperary, and to be honest, it's definitely another one that I had one answer written down and then I saw it went a different way. And like, I do get the Waterford thing. There's the Liam Cal factor. He knows plenty of these players, and I know that, to be fair, Will, to you, you've been beating the Antrim drum over the last while, so maybe I'm reading too much into the fact that they only managed to scrape through in Antrim. Was it last weekend or the weekend before that they only just managed to get there? And there's a little bit of me that's feeling that this Tipperary team again need to come good at some point. Maybe I'm putting too much stock in that, but you're in on Waterford.
Yeah, this is El Cahlico, as it's been called on social media by some people, the derby with Liam. But yeah, look, again, I think we're going to have his decision to stay in Waterford justified based on the way the season's been going so far. I think Waterford, look, they experimented a little bit last week and they hurled a little bit within themselves against Antrim, it would appear. That happened against Westmeath in the league last year. Either side is some good performances from Waterford. So I wouldn't read too much into the fact that Antrim pushed them, because you've already alluded to the fact that Antrim gave Kilkenny a good rattle. They were very close to Dublin at Corrigan Park, and then they were a penalty save being tipped over the crossbar away from getting a shock result against Waterford last weekend. So Antrim's form has been decent so far, so I wouldn't be saying, right, well, how can Waterford need to just about get over the line against them? I think Waterford at home, particularly this weekend, the way that they've been going so far in the league, which has been very impressive. Last time they played in Walsh Park, they put 7 goals past Laois, so they've got loads of firepower. Didn't see a whole lot from Tipperary in the performance last week against Dublin. Maybe there's going to be a response from them, but based on what we've seen so far, I have to go for Waterford here, and probably Waterford by a few points this weekend. I hope this isn't a clip of me that's like that account that's tweets that precede things that happen, and Tipperary go in and put in a really good display this weekend, but I just think the Daesh are going to win.
Aisling, you're also going with the obvious selection.
Yeah, I went with Waterford. Remained unbeaten, as Will said. That Sean O'Brien penalty save, that would have been a massive win for Antrim, and I'm definitely on the same boat as Will with Antrim. They're a really impressive team at the minute, but for Waterford, they've just been really impressive this year. Brilliant game against Laois as well. When then Tipperary, I think they've had a bit of a mixed start, a narrow 1 point loss against Dublin, I think it was, and then they went on and bet Kilkenny. So I do think there's very little between them, and I went back and forth on this for quite a while, but yeah, I just think with Walsh Park again, taking that into account, that Waterford are going to edge it.
We'll wrap up on the football. This is one of the games that was delayed a few weeks ago, Sligo Cavan, if I'm right, and is back on the agenda now. And this is definitely one. When you look at these predictions, there's only one way that's going to go. Everybody's gone for Cavan, Aisling on, Tommy and Will, and there's one outlier who's gone for Sligo, which is myself. And I've already outlined the reason.
Why, Adrian?
Well, the main reason was, and this is, I'm repeating myself from a couple of weeks ago, and I appreciate there's been some results in the meantime that might sort of dictate a shift away in this theory, but basically what happened was we've two Sligo natives, Gaelic sports experts around the office in Cahill and Arthur, and I asked their opinion a couple of weeks back as to which way this game was going to go, and they both sneeringly said, it has to be Cavan. So that right there and then, there was no way I could move off the fact that it's definitely going to be Sligo. But all sense says Cavan, Aisling.
Yeah, I just couldn't look by them, and not at the minute. They bet Wexford by 7 points. They bet Carlow. Look like they're just finding their form. I think it will be probably one of their toughest games yet in Division 4. But I do think they'll get over the line by maybe 3 or 4 points or so. They need to keep on track for that promotion. The likes of Grove McKiernan's playing great stuff for them at the minute. And yeah, they just look like they're trying to get things together. Things are forming and happening for them. Sligo, on the other hand, they bet Wexford by 2 points. They bet Carlow comfortably. They lost a tip by 5 points, which was a bit of a setback for them. But I think that Cavan have to have too much here, and Cavan have to start getting those big performances now that they should be getting in Division 4, to be honest.
All right, that is thanks a million, folks. That's the quick picks.
I absolutely adore them lads. I have unbelievable time for them, but they're a great bunch, but it's not acceptable.
Right, we are in a few moments' time going to speak to Ukraine footballer Nicole Kozlova. She was amongst the team that played Ireland, you might remember, out in Tala back in November, and playing her football in Denmark at the minute. We're going to talk to Nicole in just a few moments' time about the unfolding situation in Ukraine. Just to let you know what's happening on OTB Sports Radio over the course of the day. OTB Gold, Catherine Switzer is the interview today. You'll also have your football weekend kick-off coming your way at 10:30 this morning with Ger and Co. Live Friday Night Racing at 3. Shane Supple, the League of Ireland and former Dublin goalkeeper as well, is the Team 33 League of Ireland legend interview this week, and Ronnie Delaney for OTB Gold from 6, as well as Off the Ball on your radios from 7 this evening. So you're watching OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day, and we are going to speak next to Nicole Kozlova.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
The greatest league in the world is back.
Every Friday night after the League of Ireland games, a place for you to come to give your opinion to Vane. There's a little button down in the left-hand corner where you can say that you want to talk. And Johnny, you're just going to have to mute yourself because you're ruining it for everybody.
I can't. I'm still ruining it, am I?
You are, yes.
We're going to talk about Waterford FC now. Let's get into the real first division now.
For immediate reaction from around the grounds, catch League of Ireland late night, Friday nights at 10 on Twitter Spaces. Follow at Off the Ball.
I'll go medium term, and I'll say without a shadow of a doubt, Thomas Ahern. I think Thomas.
Yes, a good Waterford boy.
She's delighted now, Billy. She's delighted. More Waterford people coming through.
I think in the short term, and he's not one for the future, I think Jack O'Donoghue, who has been outstanding for months of the season, he's playing. I keep texting him saying, that's the best I've ever seen you play, and it's kind of really beginning to grate on me that every week he's just stopped reading the text. But he's playing some fantastic rugby for months at the moment. The back row for Ireland is phenomenal at the moment. Yeah. I'd love to see Jack get an opportunity. It's difficult to complain about anybody who's in the Irish squad at the moment because they're playing incredible rugby. They're doing so well. I think Thomas Ahern, he has it all. He is incredibly athletic. He's strong. More importantly, he's so coachable. He has a desire to learn. He's a desire to get better. Even since I've left, he'll text me or call me, ask me a few line-out questions. He wants to know things. He wants to get better, and he wants to grow. And he's got the basics of the physical acumen. He's brilliant. He's got that, and the rest of his game is developing at a rate of knots. And you'll see him being a mainstay for Munster and Ireland. Not going to put a time frame on it. It doesn't matter. He's outstanding.
FBD Insurance knows this sound spells trouble for van drivers. But if you're an existing FBD customer, you'll get 15% off a new van insurance policy. It's how we're keeping you and your van on the road. Visit fbd.ie or contact your local branch. FBD Insurance. Support. It's what we do. Terms and conditions apply. 15% discount available on new commercial motor policies only when an existing FBD farm, business, car or home policy is in place. FBD Insurance Group Limited, trading as FBD Insurance, is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland. Commercial motor insurance is underwritten by FBD Insurance plc.
OTB AM.
With Gillette. Get into your flow with the new Gillette Labs razor with exfoliating bar.
Now, 9:05 Friday morning. Nicole Kozlova is a Toronto-born Ukraine international. She plays her football with Denmark in Denmark with KB Hugga, and we asked her to come on and she agreed to take our call. Nicole, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Thanks a million for coming on. I appreciate that it's these are hard conversations to have and to have to visit with the unfolding situation there. How are you?
Holding up. I think reality's kind of set in. It's been a week, day 8, but of course every single day something new comes out, and it doesn't get any easier, but you kind of find new ways to adjust.
Is it hard? I mean, it's for the rest of us. We're watching this entire thing unfold on our TVs, on social media, in the newspapers. Is it tough for you to even watch some of that stuff?
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially seeing places that I've been, where my friends have lived, being completely destroyed and lives being lost, and videos shown of little kids. Yeah. Every single photo that comes out is really hard to see.
Your folks are from Dnipro, if I'm right.
Yes, they're from Dnipro.
Which is it's on the east side and inland a little bit.
Yeah, east side a bit more inland than cities.
It's hard. If I'm right, 10 days ago you were at a Ukraine camp in Turkey, a training camp.
Yeah. We had it was the international break, so we had a training camp. The girls got together in Turkey, and we had quite a successful training camp.
And you're obviously at that point you're preparing for games. Your head is very much in that mindset.
Yeah. So it was a friendly tournament in Turkey. We had 3 games. We won all 3, and our focus there was prep for our World Cup qualifiers games in April. And that was our whole mindset, the whole camp. We had a few new girls, so it was, kind of having them join the team. Our coaching staff is on the newer side. So during camp, all our focus was on football and making sure our team could grow and get better on the pitch. But again, things quickly changed the day after.
Was it Wednesday that you broke up to go back to your clubs?
Yeah, on Wednesday, all the players kind of went their own ways. That was kind of our travel day. So some went back to Ukraine. Some people like me went to their teams abroad.
Was there a sense at that point as to what was unfolding, Nicole? And it took the rest of the world, obviously, who were only casually observing, maybe by surprise to a degree. Was there a sense at that point for you guys as to what was unfolding?
Well, of course, these discussions kind of have been going on for a while. I think, as we all know now, the war has been going on since 2014. But I think most from what I've talked to girls prior, we didn't really think he would do this. We didn't think it was possible. It's not something you can ever imagine actually happening. So I don't think any of us really thought it was going to happen. And on Wednesday, we were all happy, playing cards at the airport, chatting away, talking about our trips home, kind of when they're going to get to their house, so and so. And so I think, honestly, it took by surprise every single one of us Thursday morning, when I know some of our girls woke up to bombs going off. And I woke up to lots of texts from my American friends asking me if I was okay. And I was very confused at first when I just woke up. And once I learned the news, again, you just instantly start reaching out to people,
And your parents, had your parents were over to see you in Turkey, Nicole?
Yeah. So I guess you can say thankfully, but also I know we have this bittersweet feeling, but my family is safe in Turkey right now. As they came to watch, they're my national team's biggest supporters. They kind of try to see us wherever we go. Of course, they're there to support me, but again, I think they've become my whole team's kind of family at our away games.
Yeah.
They were in Turkey with us.
And have they stayed on in Turkey now?
Yeah, they're currently in Turkey. I've had lots of talks with them, and they hope they can make it back to Ukraine once it's safe, because no matter, they want to be there helping, as I think the whole world has seen that every Ukrainian, is stepping up to fight for their country. And I know my parents and siblings kind of feel the same way. They want to help in as many ways as they can. Right now they're doing it from afar, and when they can, they'll do it more hands-on.
Well, it's such a tough decision to have to make. I was listening to an interview with a Ukraine MP last weekend who was saying that if you had asked her 3 days previous about the idea of taking up a rifle, that she would have been in the same mindset that all the rest of us are at the minute, and that you just can't comprehend it. And suddenly, when you're faced with this thing and you have to make that choice, she was giving the interview, as I said, with she had a rifle in her hand, and it becomes a reality and a tough choice to have to make, Nicole. That's something that nobody ever wants to be confronted with.
Yeah, and I think nobody really knows how they're going to react to it until, it's put in front of them. But I know personally I've been so proud of seeing, as much how it's awful that they even have to do that, but to see kind of every Ukrainian just step up and do it. Yeah.
Is it hard to be, in some ways, to not be there, Nicole, to a degree?
No, definitely. I know I felt, especially the first few days, I felt really, really guilty that, I was just with my teammates and I got to go back to Denmark, train, even play a game 3 days later. And my teammates, some of them are living in bomb shelters. Others, it took them 4 days to get home, just jumping from place to place. And each of them is, scared for their country, scared for their life. Like, they never know, even though right now, as I know, all of them are in kind of the quieter cities, but it's one of those, you go to bed, when are we next? So I know I felt a bit of guilt kind of that I'm here safe. And it could have been me, could have been my family. And, yeah.
Do you know what the situation is with, say, your home house at the moment? Is it all intact? Is everything okay in your home area?
Yeah, so Dnipro, as you mentioned, it's more on the inside. So as of now, it's more on the quieter side, and it's actually really bit, there's a lot of volunteers going out. It's, like I said, outside is a bit more safe there right now. So the house is intact, but a lot of volunteers going outside. And I know in Dnipro, everybody's doing what they can to help the cities nearby that are not so lucky at the moment. So
there's almost like a migration, not just away from Dnipro at the moment. There is a move towards some of the more affected cities.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of people, are leaving to go west. But again, everybody is trying to send as much as they can to those cities that are really being impacted right now. So making those, I know in Dnipro, they are sitting on the ground and spending hours and hours making those Molotov bottles that the government had asked for help to make. So you just see people there sitting, kind of just working hours because that's all they really can do to help.
In terms of your own situation at the moment, is there other Ukrainians in your own locality? Are there people that you've been able to not only just keep in touch with, but people that you've actually been able to meet up with who are going through the very same thing?
Yeah, I right away when this all happened, I knew I wanted to find people kind of in this neighborhood, people in Denmark who are Ukrainians or just that support. And on Sunday we had an official demonstration in Copenhagen that I went to, and over 10,000 people came, which was great to see in such, I guess, a smaller country. And then even just yesterday, I met up with a few Ukrainians, and it was thousands and thousands of bags of donation around Denmark. And we spent kind of hours just organizing them and sorting them and putting them into boxes to then be mailed off to Ukraine. And so, I was there for a few hours with some of my teammates, and just being surrounded by, it was other Ukrainians who either moved to Denmark, but even then there were some Danish people who aren't Ukrainian, but were there to help. And you just see them work tirelessly. Like, I didn't see a single person take a single break when I was there, just opening a bag, sorting it, putting it into boxes, taping up the box, putting it on the truck and so on. And it was just consistent hours of work. But first you got to see those thousands of donations, which, came from all around Denmark. And then seeing all these volunteers, I know they feel kind of the same way, that they're from afar. And so they're trying to do what they can. And it's the minimum that someone can do when they're here.
I presume there's nothing else on your mind, Nicole, pretty much. You're waking up every morning, if you can manage to get some sleep, and you're hoping to see some positive news from these loose peace negotiations that are ongoing.
Yeah, definitely. I'm I'm someone who tries to stay off my phone. But in times like this, I think I'm constantly on my phone, just, trying to get the most recent news, check in with my teammates, check in with friends, family, to make sure, everybody's alive. And I go to bed making sure everybody's alive. And then I wake up and the first thing I do is always grab my phone, because it's one of those, I'm, hoping that it's quiet, like there's no, nothing crazy has happened again. And then I'm crossing my fingers and maybe one day I'll pick up my phone and it's all over. But for now, I'm constantly, that it's always on the back of my mind, no matter what I'm doing.
It's really interesting because obviously, I guess in sport there is this much softer sort of form of nationalism and being proud in your country. And I guess what we saw on Saturday night, certainly in this part of the world, we kind of would have watched the scenes between Mykolenko and Zinchenko, but before the Everton-Manchester City game, this deeply emotional moment where there was a Ukrainian player on both squads. Have you thought about what it's going to be like when you and your teammates do get back together again and do eventually play that first game, or that next game, I should say, as a national team?
Yeah, I know right now for a lot of my teammates, football isn't even crossing their mind, just because, that's it's not even close to being important to them right now. But I know when we do have the opportunity to get back together, I don't think there's any words to describe it, but I don't think anything or anybody's going to be able to break us. And I know already, we sing the anthem before every national team game, and a lot of us already sing it very loud. And I just, I think when that anthem gets turned on and we're all there lined up hugging each other, tears will be shed, but it's just going to be so much strength flowing from each of us together. I don't really know how to describe what that's going to be like. I know I am looking forward to that day where we can safely, and things have been, resolved, or I don't know if you can say resolved, but just waiting for that day that I'm back with them, doing what we love to do as a group. But I think there's going to be even so much more meaning to it. And I know I'm going to carry that with me for the rest of my life.
Yeah, and I think we're all very much willing that day to come much sooner rather than later. Although there was a chill, I have to say, yesterday when the Macron reports of having spoken with Putin and the idea that he wants to take Ukraine, certainly I think sent a chill across the world. Have you any sense or any thoughts about this sanctions approach, Nicole? What are your any sense of whether that's going to be do enough to shift the system from where it's at the minute?
Oh, yeah, honestly, some things you try not to go too much into, but I think in times like this, they are very important and a necessity. And I know especially something that we as Ukrainians right now are really pushing is, a no-fly zone. Something that I think is it's very important and needed right now for Ukraine. With, we see cities being destroyed by missiles right now. We see the whole nuclear kind of being taken over, and that's huge and very, very, very scary. So I do think these sanctions have been important and needed, very necessary, but it's not over, and they're not stopping yet. So you need to keep doing things, I think, is the most important. And I think that's also something I've been pushing kind of from here. It's not a one-day thing, You posted it to support, or like I wore a shirt on Saturday, but since then, every day I've been doing something for Ukraine to keep, informing people, making those donations, spending time. That's I think how I feel, that it's just not a one and done thing for sure.
Yeah, well, you're doing some great stuff there. We really appreciate you jumping on the call this morning to give us and our audience a bit of a sense of what it's like for you. Do stay well as you can. Thanks a million for speaking with us.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. That's Nicole Kozlova she's a Ukraine footballer. She played in Tala back in November against the Republic of Ireland, and really finds herself in that desperate situation now, and for her and her family as well. And we appreciate her taking the time to jump on this morning. And by the way, a reminder as well that if you are of a mind to give money or to be able to donate in some small way at all, the Irish Red Cross website is probably as good a place as you can go, and to directly support the effort on the ground there to help out with the effort. So that's probably the best place to do that. It's 19 minutes past 9. It's Friday morning. You're watching OTB AM. We have Brian Kerr standing by and on the way to look ahead to the Manchester Derby and some of the football of the weekend. But before that, John Giles was back with Nathan last night. Here he is on Leeds sacking Marcelo Bielsa this week.
And I think they've been very, very quick off the mark to get rid of him. And I don't know what the situation was being. I don't know whether... I heard rumours that Mr. Bielsa turned down players that they wanted to bring in. But the thing is, were they his players that he wanted, Nathan? You know? Like if the director of football, that's what he's there for a lot of the time, to bring in players, not the manager. So he might have gone and said, right, I'm bringing Joe Bloggs in, and the manager said, well, I don't want him. So they didn't get anybody. So they like the fact is, they got nobody to replace those players in that particular time. And with not having a big panel, I mean, if Manchester United, not now, Liverpool, had 3 players missing, which they have Salah and these players, they have cover. But Leeds don't have any cover, and they're very, very, and they spent hardly any money. And I hope all I'll say is I hope that the new guy comes in does reach their expectations. But I think Bielsa has performed miracles at Leeds since he's gone there, and I think he deserved to get to the end of the season and hopefully get these players back in and get better results. They could still stay up.
John Giles with Nathan last night, as he is every Thursday evening, and you can check out that full piece in the OTB football feed as well on our podcast network. Brian Kerr, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, how are we doing?
Are you saving the celebrations of the weekend, or were you giving it a big one last night?
Sorry, I'm just missing a bit there, Adrian. The sound at my end.
It might be selective hearing, but I'm saying happy birthday to you.
All right. Okay. I think we let that one just move on. I'm glad we got through yesterday.
Not
here today.
Not a discussion point. We're all in the same boat. But listen, many happy returns to you. Come here. Is this the first Premier League game that you have been back at since the pandemic?
Yeah. Since it's actually almost exactly, it'll be 2 years exactly. The last game we were at was on the 8th of March, 2020. With Manchester United and Manchester City. United won 2-0. And it was a very good game. But it was a very strange day, I remember. It was when COVID was more or less in its infancy in Ireland and England. But the danger signs were already there. And I remember going to the game very well, that we were masked up and taking the precautions necessary, and lots of hand sanitizer with us, and doing all the things we were told to do shortly after that, in let's say an extreme way. But I remember when we got to England, and particularly when we got to the game and got to the media room, people were very nonchalant about their approach over there. And the media room at Old Trafford is a very tight area. It's not a very big room. It should be much bigger given the coverage and the interest that there is in Manchester United. Obviously that day it was particularly busy with the Derby match. The room was packed. We were in early and got reasonable places. But I always remember how loose people were compared to how we were already saying, look, this is really dangerous and we need to take precautions and we need to wear masks and we need to be using hand sanitizer and so on. And where their attitude seemed to be, this won't get us, we're fine, this will be grand. And it didn't turn out that way for them or for anyone else. Within a very short period after that, things had deteriorated really, really badly. But the game on the day was a good game. Manchester United surprise winners. They won 2-0. Bruno Fernandes chipped the ball over a wall to the right-hand side, the Man City goal. It was a very clever free kick, and Martial caught it coming over his shoulder and stuck it into the net. Anthony Martial, he's gone obviously now, or he's out alone. And the second goal was laid on McTominay, where Ederson tried to pick out a Man City player in the middle of the pitch and miskicked it. and Tomini got onto it and scored from a long way out. Edison was out of the goal, and that's kind of how the game was. Things haven't probably changed dramatically since then. Adrian, Manchester United were in 6th place that day. There was 27 matches gone. Manchester City were in 2nd place. They were a long way. I think they were 22 points behind Liverpool with a game in hand at that stage. And then we had the whole very disjointed remainder of that season when the game stopped shortly afterwards. And there was no games again until June in the Premier League. And then, of course, there was no crowds when the games did come back. So it'll be a much different situation this week. Thankfully, crowds will be back. There'll be massive crowd, obviously, at Manchester City. And let's hope we get a great game.
Yeah, very hard to tell. I know, like you referenced the game 2 years ago. Even if you referenced the game in November, the 2-0 win the other way, and it felt like much more than a 2-0 win. But like very hard to know, Brian. It's in terms of trying to predict this game, they're unpredictable at the best of times. But just given, obviously, United have a new manager, but just given the variables, certainly on the United side, like it's hard to get a sense of how the game is going to go on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean they've been very inconsistent. We initially saw seemed to be a little bit of progress under Ralph Rangnick. Then it seemed to drop off a bit. Now it's it's hard to know. I think they're in a funny place at the moment. Manchester United, they've 8 games unbeaten, but they've won 4 and drawn 4. So that's not great. You know, they'd be better off winning 6 and losing 2 than winning 4 and drawn 4, depending on who the 2 losses would have been to. But last week, again, you know, lots of the ball against Watford, loads of chances, but didn't fail to score. A bit unusually for Manchester United. Usually you get reward with it's late in the game, in injury time or the old Fergie time, whatever it is. But they couldn't get a goal. And, you add in other draws, draw with Southampton when they're leading, draw away to Burnley, draw away to Aston Villa, losing the cup game with Middlesbrough on penalties, getting knocked out of the cup, meant they've had a free week, I suppose, for training this week, which might help them in terms of the City game in particular. But overall, they're in a state of flux, I suppose, and uncertainty about who's going to be the manager next year. Is it going to be Pochettino? Is it going to be Ten Hag, or is it going to be a surprise appointment? I saw yesterday a lot of discussion about, or suggestion in the paper, that Ancelotti could be in the running, even though Real Madrid will win the league at the moment. Or is there going to be they're going to pull someone else out of the bag? Players wise as well, uncertainty about the future of lots of the players. Obviously, like say Ronaldo, Cavani, Martial. There's probably a few more. Pogba, most obvious one, the middle of the pitch, and several other players, I'd say. But it'll depend on who eventually gets to be the manager and whether Rangnick stays on in the role. He's supposed to have another 2 years to be in an advisory role. We'll see if that comes about. But, it's a difficult time for Manchester United fans. They're in 4th place at the moment, trying to chase the Champions League positions, 2 points ahead of Arsenal and West Ham, with Arsenal have 3 games in hand, 5 ahead of Spurs. So there's certainly a lot to do in the last 11 games of the season. They need a good run, which they had 2 years ago after that Manchester City game. They had quite a good run because, as I said, they were in 6th place that day, and they ended up at the end of the season in 3rd place on 66 points, 33 points behind Liverpool as it happened at the end. But, they need a very good run between now and the end of the season to confirm a Champions League place, but at least they still are going in the Champions League. Second leg against Atletico Madrid coming up, the week after next. Which they at home they should be Atletico Madrid, but maybe not. Atletico are showed in the first game they're still a very, very difficult side to play against, and they completely disrupted Manchester United's rhythm on the night. United didn't play well for the first hour of the game. Eventually they got themselves a goal, but overall they were fortunate to get the draw. So they needed to continue they need to continue in the Champions League this season, but they're certainly not guaranteed the top 4 spot next year. City, on the other hand, look like they will win the league this year. But there's been a bit of hope for the others. The fact that they dropped 5 points lately, that defeat to Spurs was a big surprise, extraordinary game, and the draw with Southampton. But other than that, they've been relentless. Liverpool are in great form, have made up 5 points when Manchester City dropped those points. Liverpool won, but they're 6 points behind. They have a difficult match against West Ham this weekend. It's hard for Liverpool to stay at the pace that Manchester City are at. But this is another game where obviously Liverpool supporters and Liverpool club will be hoping City drop points.
What would you do with Ronaldo, Brian, since you mentioned him? Like, the one reason for keeping him in the team has totally deserted him, his goals over the last 9 or 10 weeks. Is it unthinkable that he gets dropped this weekend, or is it almost, does he almost have to?
Does he have to play, or does he have to be dropped? I think the fact that Cavani is injured at the moment makes it easier for the manager, for Ralph Rangnick, to leave him out. I mean, he left him out a few weeks ago, and there was a whole furore around it. And I think I said after the commentary match for Manchester United and Leeds 2 weeks ago, when United came back, or Leeds came back from 2-0 down, United ultimately won 4-2, that when he was last left out of the team, he sat on the bench with a face like a robber's dog. He doesn't look like he's a great team player in that situation. But given Cavani has been injured, and I don't think he's available for selection at the moment for this weekend, it looks like Ronaldo will play again. I mean, I wouldn't be overcritical of the front players that didn't score the goals last week, but they should have. I mean, they got something like 22 shots on goal and numerous clear-cut chances, and they didn't take them. But I think he'd play in this game. Yeah, I do think Ronaldo will play in the City game.
And come good?
Well, he's the law of averages. He doesn't generally go for long periods without goals. He's not like a streak centre forward who has streaks of goals, like in 2s and 3s and the odd one, and then goes quiet for a few matches. I mean, Ronaldo's whole career has been just the consistency of his goal scoring. That's why people and managers, I suppose, have been prepared to allow him play in a different way to many modern teams now, where the expectancy is the centre forward. He's the first point of defence in many ways, in that he leads off the press. Ronaldo doesn't do that. He makes a token effort at pressing at times. If the others join in, well and good, then he might have another go. But sometimes he doesn't look like he's that committed to it. That his whole intent is about keeping, in the latter part of his career particularly, his whole intent is about conserving his energy, making sure that when the moment comes, he's ready to do the ultimate job and stick the ball in the net. So, I'm sure he will be as determined as anyone to do that. But against Manchester City, I mean, the style of Manchester City and the way opposition plays against them, Pep was asked recently how does he find it playing against opposition these days that most teams sit in? And he said, well, that's usually the way. There are very few teams that don't sit in and play with a low block, as it's described nowadays. I think he mentioned only Liverpool, Arsenal and Brighton are the teams that try to take them on, right? That was interesting that he left Manchester United out of that. But I think that Manchester United have played on the counter-attack against City and been successful against them on a fairly regular basis. So I think that's how it will be. I think United will adapt their game, adapt their tactics a little bit. Whatever the system is, it'll be some formation. Whether it's 3 centre-backs, we'll have to wait and see. Whether it's Maguire, Lindelof and Foran all play as 3 centre-backs, or whether it's some system that's basically a 4-5-1 with Ronaldo as the centre forward. It'll be some combination that where the wideish players who would normally be in advanced positions, say the likes of Sancho, Rashford, those type of players will be expected to work deeper and harder more often, which is what they should be doing anyway. That's one of the big criticisms that most people have at Manchester United, that those players don't do enough when the opposition have the ball, and they don't work hard enough to retrieve it. They don't work hard enough to protect the full-backs, Wan-Bissaka and Luke Shaw, or whoever it is, whether it's Dallow on the right side, the right back position. But they don't do enough.
Brian, can I just ask you about Tottenham before we wrap? They're playing not until Monday night, but it was another defeat for them midweek this time in the FA Cup. You didn't have as dramatic a reaction from Antonio Conte as we did the week before when they lost to Burnley, when he said maybe he's not good enough, maybe I'm not good enough to take this team to the top. But is that just because of the FA Cup this week, or do you think he's just ran out of almost places to go in terms of his dramatic quotes in the aftermath of the match? That didn't seem as severe.
Sorry, guys.
Sorry, Brian.
Well, I'd say he looks a very frustrated figure, particularly when the game is going against him in matches. You know, he's the he's the ultimate hot wire on the line when his team are in the match. I've always noticed that about him over the years, watching him when he was at Chelsea in particular. When the game is going well and they're in the game and they're in with a chance, he's directing everything on the touchline. He's moving the players about. He's constantly pointing and trying to pull players into specific positions. But I always noticed with him, when the game started to drift away on them, when they were a goal or two behind, he's much less active on the touchline. It's almost like he loses heart very quickly. And I think that transfers to the team. But looking at him at Spurs, it's been such an up and down time. Initially, they went, I think, 8-9 games undefeated when they went in all competitions. And then it started slipping away. There was a lot of those games were draws as well. But now it's I think he is seeing the kind of the ultimate with Spurs again. I mean, losing to Middlesbrough. The only thing you can say, they were well forewarned with Middlesbrough having beaten Manchester United on penalties in the Cup, and it was. It's the only competition they could have won now. They went out tamely out of Europe, be it that it was the Conference League. They went tamely. They weren't good in the group anyway, and then they needed to beat Rennes in the last match by a number of goals to get through, and that match didn't get played. I know UEFA decided to throw them out. So there would have been no doubt that his concentration. I look at the team he picked. I think it was the best team as far as he was concerned that he could have picked the other night for the Middlesbrough match. It was more or less, I think, the same team that beat Leeds the previous week. And when they played well against Leeds last weekend, they won 4-0. Got off to a great start. Played with great intent. Matt Doherty scores an early goal, and so on. But they never really looked the part. That doesn't the Lloris, there's doubts about Lloris. The three centre backs that he's playing, Dyer back in the side, you're thinking they're a little bit better, but not much better. Romero hasn't really settled into the Premier League or English football yet, and great hopes for him when he came from Atalanta. Ben Davies, really a left back, playing as one of the three centre halves, struggling to get consistency from the wing backs. Reguilon, the big signing for them, hasn't been good enough as a defender. On the other side, Emerson Royale, the same. Matt Doherty seemed to be slightly back in favour now, but you know, is he a great defensive right back? Probably, I would say not. His best qualities are in the attacking side of his game, middle of the field. Can't find a really reliable pairing in there. So it just goes on and on. I mean, the thing for Spurs and for Spurs supporters and for Daniel Levy and everyone else is, will he still stay? Will he stay on Conte at the end of the season? And will the Spurs, will Daniel Levy basically back him to bring in the type of players he wants that will make the impact on the team? The two Juventus players, Kalashevsky and Bentancur, have had a little bit of influence, but not a major influence. I mean, if they were top players, Juventus wouldn't have been letting them go to Spurs. That's how I view it. I think both of them are good players. Both of them have potential to do better. They probably both need settling in time, but Spurs needed results. They need results now. They're a good bit off. I think in things about they're down to 7 now. Arsenal's form would put Spurs in a difficult position as regards the 4th place. Manchester United are obviously there at the moment. Spurs are a good bit short of that. They need to be very consistent over the last 11 games. They probably need to get something like 26 or 27 points to get into the top 4. I don't see them doing that. And then will Conte stay around for next year? If Spurs are in the Europa League or the Conference League or not in Europe at all, it's hard to imagine. I'm sure there'll be better offers, or there will be offers for him. I'm sure plenty of the top Italian clubs would have him back, no bother. Or, so it could be another difficult and interesting summer for Spurs.
Very briefly, Brian, before we let you off, rocky start for Pats. Doesn't come much bigger than tonight, though.
Yeah, big game. It's not been a good few days for them. Started well with the victory over Shells, and then obviously lost 2 games. Sligo with a better team on Friday night at Richmond Park. Bowes, the match was quite even on Monday night. Wasn't much between the two sides. Good goal for Young Mallon. Bad mistake by Scott, the player on loan for Wolves in the right back position. But massive game. And, they were very close games with Shamrock Rovers last year. Rovers got the edge in 3 of them. Narrow victories. The other one was drawn. But a big match for both clubs tonight. Rovers have already lost the last away game to Derry. They've got 6 points, so they need a win as well. But look, overall, I just hope the league is more competitive this year. That there's more teams contention, other than St. Pat's and Sligo to a degree last year. There was no real challenge on Shamrock Rovers. They won the league very convincingly. Once they beat Pats in the early game in the 4th series of matches, it was more or less Rovers' title. I hope we have a much better contest all round for the league, and I'm hopeful that that's the case. I think that there's a good few other teams that are in better nick than they were last year. But for St. Pat's and Tim Clancy, it's an awkward time with the change. So many new players in at the back. They played some good football in the game so far this year, and there's some very promising players there. And I'm hoping for an entertaining game tonight in the packed Richmond Park.
All right, good stuff. Enjoy all the football over the weekend. Thanks, Brian.
Thanks a lot. Thanks, lads.
Cheers, Brian Kerr on the line there, and certainly that wish for it to be a more competitive League of Ireland season looks to be is off to a good start. You are watching OTB AM, brought to you live each morning by Gillette Labs for an effortless finish to your day. You can stay tuned to Off the Ball across the weekend, live from 1 o'clock tomorrow with JD for all your football goodness, and Saturday panel as well. Live from 1 o'clock on Sunday with Joe, and as we mentioned, there's live commentary that Manchester Derby 4:30. Brian alongside Nathan Murphy. And we'll be back on Monday from 7:30 as well, as always, with OTB AM. The football kickoff with Sky live across our channels from 10:30 this morning. Right now we're going to leave you with Nathan, and take you on. Have a good weekend.
Yeah, you too. Have a good one.
Nearly forgot about you there for a second.
Yeah.
Nathan, talking to Eddie Brennan.
Now, let's talk hurling. Eddie Brennan is on the line. Evening, Eddie.
Good evening, Nathan. How's the form?
I'm well. A lot to talk about in the hurling league. Well, I think there is, because it feels as though there's something happening at Limerick, but maybe we're just reading too much into the fact that they've lost their 3 games, and it's wishful thinking that the chasing pack is getting that little bit closer. Is it wishful thinking?
Yeah, it's hard to know. I suppose it's a bit of everything, really. I think it's shown that after last year's performance in the All-Ireland final that they are human after all. I think, I suppose there's a lot of discussion around it, saying, do we press the panic button yet? But John Kiley is a shrewd operator. I don't think he'd be pressing the panic button just yet. I think if you were to even look at, the teams that Limerick have put out in the matches so far, if you had maybe 8, 9, 10 of your All-Ireland performing team, that's about the height of it. So from what I'm looking at, he's integrating 3 or 4 new young lads every day, guys that are on the periphery of the squad. He's giving them their go, and then he's mixing and matching some of his experienced guys. So there's a few little habits creeping in that I'm sure he'd like to weed out quickly enough. I think. What
are they?
Performance. Well, sure, look, I suppose everyone is talking about the discipline side of it, but I don't think it's the crisis maybe that they're making it out. I mean, I think in some ways, if you look at last weekend, for example, and I suppose one of the key things we always talk about now with the modern players is their in-game awareness and their smarts and what's going on and what's happening. And I think equally, if you look at both red cards, I'm saying Shane Kingston doesn't really need to commit to that tackle initially on Sean Finn. He's winning well, he's flying, he's going well. So you're kind of measuring your tackles. I mean, and the same with Shamie Flanagan. If I'm wearing a Limerick jersey last Saturday or Sunday when that happens, and Cork are winning, they're dominating, and they get a man sent off, well, the one thing you don't do is kind of rush into a tackle. And look, it happens, it's a mistake, sometimes it can happen, but you're looking at throwing your team a lifeline there. And I think it's more that, it's the mindset maybe that would probably bug John Kiley a little bit, saying to Shamie Flanagan in that, one-on-one chat afterwards, Jesus, you can't do that. You need to be smarter than that. You need to be cleverer than that. You need to be thinking of the team. And, I think the little habits that I'm referring to is maybe that we need to tidy up our tackles in terms of, we always talk about disciplined tackles, getting your tackles right, being hunting the ball and not being kind of, as a player, I suppose, we often talk about, and I'm guilty of some occasionally criticising refs, but if players give a referee a decision, they have nobody to blame but themselves. And that's the reality. So if you fly into a tackle and you put your hands up high or you wrap a fella around the neck, you're now leaving yourself vulnerable. And they're the little habits. I think the habit of obviously losing is something that he would like to cut that out straight away and clear it in as the weekend. What better way to maybe get back on the horse?
Would you put any of it down to just finding their fitness at the moment? Just been a little bit off in the tackling, even in terms of the bit of discipline that, like, frustration kicks in a lot quicker when the other team are maybe a step ahead of you. That it does feel as though the round robin series has, I don't want to say killed off the league, but it's made it much more difficult to analyse the league, because like these teams need to be almost at full cylinders from mid-April on, and Limerick understandably should have gone and enjoyed their success. That all of it's just feeding into a few little things that actually, once they're up and running, will just fall away.
Yeah, perhaps. I think that's the really important point, Nathan. I think there's a combination of a number of factors, and you're probably talking about dropping off 2 or 3% maybe on each one, and it's just the accumulation of that then is where the bad habits creep in. And I suppose that's probably first and foremost one of the big things that the management team will be looking at doing. Say, okay, we'll be cognizant of the fact that we're probably not as fit or as sharp as we can be. But, and they're probably doing a heavy load during the week. So therefore, those polished performance maybe that we associate with Limerick might not be there during the league. And that's not the biggest, problem in the world either for a manager or for a group of players. But I think once the endeavour is right and you're getting to a point where you're saying you're tidying things up. And again, look, I think if Limerick, the league semi-final now is probably out of their reach. Is that going to bother John Kiley? I don't think it is. I think he'll get a nice block of 2 or 3 weeks in the lead into championship where he will have these guys on their own. He's also probably trying to get a few guys in on that, get a bit of experience. But on that point, I think for Colm Coughlin maybe, or, even Colm O'Neill, these guys, getting a game. If you're getting into, breaking onto an inter-county team, and you have, Declan Hannon to your left, Sean Finn behind you, Dan Morrissey, Dara Donovan in front of you, further up the field in front of him, you have Tom Morrissey coming back helping you out. That's not a bad way to integrate yourself in on a team. But when you're playing with a team where there's, maybe a new midfielder in front of you, a novice midfielder in front of you, another one behind you in the corner, they're just little things that can make that step up a little bit more tricky. And I think John Kiley has tried to give the guys game time and balance it between having, his tried and trusted crew, maybe, giving them a little bit of a kind of a fright. Maybe the odd time where he likes to put a little shot across the bow, but some of these lads he has shown before, he's not afraid to drop a lad. And I think ultimately what John Kiley wants is that mad competition for places, competition for jerseys that has, his more established crew a fear their life of losing that jersey.
Will he be disappointed then, Eddie, that maybe he hasn't got that? Because I was listening to the Hurling pod with Paul Murphy and James Skehill, and Paul was talking about that, about the young players that he was bringing in, and that they haven't really proven themselves yet. And are we overestimating the strength and depth of this Limerick squad?
No, look, if they were good enough to be playing, it's that simple. And it was said about, I suppose maybe our group, it was something that was said once upon a time with us, that there was, and there is equally good fellas there on the bench. But when you're thinking of, you can maybe, whatever, Tom Morrissey's injured someday, or one of your wing backs, and you can drop in a guy. And like I said, he has the comfort of 7 or 8 experienced guys all around him. And that's different. But when there's 4 or 5 of them playing one in each line, that's a little bit different. That's a little bit harder, because, you're now maybe having to step up a little bit more. And yet you can say maybe they're not ready just yet. But I do think, someone like Colm O'Neill is plenty good enough. I think he has shown that. And I do think, the point I want to make there, I suppose the equally important one, is there are certain fellas, obviously, too, within that Limerick team. You have obviously 15 very strong guys and a couple of good lads on the bench that they have. But there's certain guys within that core then that they just can't be without. And I think Cian Lynch, maybe, Declan Hannon with the 2 guys, Burns and Hayes either side of them, having, certain guys there, they provide leadership. They take the pressure off maybe other lads there. So I think what you're seeing is that if certain guys aren't in certain positions, definitely there's a vulnerability about them. But obviously, look, that will be what John Kiley will want, is that he'd like 1 or 2 new faces coming in, because he has Peter Casey to replace. But it's a balancing act, really, and some are ready to go, some maybe not so much. Others, then you're looking at your match day strategy and saying, look, maybe he's good for 10 or 15 minutes if we get him coming down the straight.
Yeah, and they've plenty of experience of making sure they peak at the right time, so I don't think anyone's going to be writing them off just yet.
I wouldn't be too
Go for it, Eddie. Write them off right here, right now. It'll make a nice little promo for the summer for us.
Yeah, definitely.
So they go to Ennis on Sunday to take on Clare. Cork are flying it. Put 219 on Limerick last time out. 3 wins from 3. There's always a fear when a team loses an All-Ireland final in the way that Cork did, that it would be such a blow to confidence that it's going to be hard to come back to regroup. But they are building on getting to that All-Ireland final. The style of play is Limerick-esque, and in terms of moving past the defeat, how important was that victory, do you feel, over Limerick?
Yeah, it's important. I think it's like anything. I think when you get a good clipping like they did, and I think, even when you look back on that, reflect on that All-Ireland last year, they seem to have got stage fright. They seem to have got spooked. And a performance or an experience like that either makes or breaks you. And I think when you sit down as a group and with your management, and there's a little bit of bloodletting and there's a bit of straight talking, I think that either is going to define you going forward, or you're going to regress or just not take on the challenge. And I think sometimes, obviously, I don't think they're that much better or improves with the win last Sunday, but I do think that sometimes the hurt maybe can be let out some way, and I think that's probably what Cork, maybe if there was doubts in their minds about, are they good enough to come back from last year's defeat? Are they good enough to be in an All-Ireland final? That's just an endorsement for them as a group. That's an endorsement for the management to say, yeah, look, we are plenty good enough. Will Limerick present a bigger challenge than that down the line? They probably will, without a doubt. We'll have to be better. But I think if you're looking for little shoots of encouragement, yeah, we're well good enough to take on Limerick. We're well good enough to go up to their backyard. And I think Cork have done that a number of times, even in Munster Championship in the last 6 or 7 years. They've shown they're capable of going up to Limerick and getting a performance. And even some in Limerick would feel that Cork are that they're kind of a bogey team for Limerick historically. But Kieran Kingston will be happy with the performance. He'll be happy with the endeavour. They look to be in good nick, so they're in a good place. But look, there's only one thing that Cork can do, unfortunately, that's going to maybe put all this to bed, and that's they have to win Liam McCarthy. It's as simple as that, unfortunately, for them.
Yeah,
and they have a good young squad there.
We do all want to read a lot in, but we were looking back, and 2009 league, Waterford defeated Kilkenny at Walsh Park, which was after the 08 final. Maybe Waterford were in a similar position to Cork. I'm wondering, was that worth that in Waterford? What did that mean in the Kilkenny dressing room afterwards?
I was particularly stung because it was one of the 2 times I was captain of Kilkenny Nate. So thanks for bringing up that. I can remember the day as well. I think, look, you are going to get a reaction, and that's just the way sport is. That when you get hurt by a certain team and you maybe didn't do yourself justice, I think there's definitely you want to kind of make amends for it. Yeah, it's not going to make up for it, but it's a confidence builder really more than anything else. And yeah, look, at the time, I suppose we were just all driven every day we went out. So I think afterwards, I know I was personally very disappointed with that, but Waterford had a real snap about them, and I think there was similarities in how Cork played last weekend. Waterford were really organised that day. I think I was marking Brick Walsh. He sat very deep in the 45. The midfielders were back. And again, I remember when we played them in the semi-final later that year, the All-Ireland semi-final, I ended up marking them again towards the end of that match. And I remember trying to draw him out, trying to go off out deep out the field to bring him out of there. But yeah, look, there is, like I said, there's little similarities there. But I think Cork are probably, they should be mature enough now. And I think Kieran Kingston certainly is, to say, look, lads, we'll take that. It's a great one for a foundation going forward. But let's progress from that. Let's not dwell on that.
The captaincy was something you took seriously.
Yeah, it is, Nate, and you would. I didn't get it too often. I think the week before we might have played Antrim up in Cushendall or to somewhere off up I think we could almost see the Giants Causeway, and there was a great atmosphere that day, and we won. But the following week was brought back down to earth. But it was normal service maybe after that when the Ballyhale lads were back after that, I think. But yeah, no, look, I think there is the responsibility. There's responsibility anyway, but when you get that kind of an honour as well, I remember personally that day, it definitely stung me for the few days and maybe weeks after that you just felt when you do take on that role that you have to be, you have to make it happen. And just, I know myself that day it wasn't, but look, all down to experience. So I was glad to let Henry or someone else take on that.
Cody didn't take in then. It wasn't a case of you're never getting that armband again. It was just the Ballyhale lads were returning.
I know. I was hoping he'd overturn the old rule in Kilkenny where the county champions. But
you'd make such an impression in your 2 goals that he'd think, actually, let's rip it all up.
Yeah. Let's reinvent the wheel here. Oh no, God no. He knew the Village were a decent team coming along as well.
Let's talk about Wexford. Sort of another team who've won all their matches so far. They beat Limerick, Clare and Galway. New management team. Tipperary's Dara Egan is in, replacing Davy Fitz. From what you've seen of Wexford so far, what's the main change that Dara Egan has brought about?
I think he's probably taken off the handbrake a little bit. He's probably... I think Wexford had a certain management style and a way of playing for the last while, and I think it was fairly prescriptive. I would feel, in my opinion, it was prescriptive enough. There was a set way that they played, and they played that way, and lads had certain roles, and I think with some of those roles there was probably limitations on what they could do. But I think, look, it worked to a point. It got them to a certain point, and I think they probably hit rock bottom in 2020 when Clare knocked them out of the championship, albeit during COVID times. But they just seem to be a little bit energised at the moment. I think, from what I understand, Dara Egan and his management team haven't flogged them so far. And I think if you look at Wexford's conditioning over the last 5 or 6 years, with Davy Fitzgerald, they've probably done heavy fitness. So that's in the bank. So they don't need to, go after that. I think they can top that up a little bit and measure it, engage it, and obviously be fresh. But they just seem to be hurling a little bit more direct. I think you can see lads are being given opportunities. Even just one case in point there, just one guy I'd like to highlight is Conal Flood seems to be playing with really good freedom there as a dynamic attacking wing back. Rory O'Connor is probably the focal point of the attack, and while Conor MacDonald maybe has missed a game or two, he seems to be being hit with more direct balls. So they seem to be able to play the system. They seem to be able to play the ball out short, but they seem to be, for me, going a little bit more direct with it. They have good skills. They have a good strong squad there, and I think they're in a really good place going into it. They've Offaly the weekend they should get through there. It might be an opportunity even for them, and I mean this respectfully, is for Dara to give a few more lads. They haven't got to spin a goal. And then obviously at the end of it, they're facing into Cork, but they're looking at, a league semi-final at this stage. And, I think Dara Egan will obviously want to be the championship performance, but would he take a league title? I think they would. I think Wexford would love a league title.
Like that change in style and system is probably needed as well, I presume, for the players. That bit of freshness, actually, the system that Davey implemented brought them to where he, nearly to where he wanted them to be. But actually, after a few years of that, you just need to be able to probably just be let loose.
Yeah, I think that's it. Let go. I mean, they've a lot of stuff in the bank. Like I said, the fitness is there and how to play systems. I think they would have done a lot of analysis and stuff like that. So these guys are well programmed. So they're up to the pace. They know what they're about. And it's just maybe tweaking things a little bit more. Maybe it's going a little bit more direct and saying to lads to actually go and hurl. I think after 2019, they were on the brink. And I think maybe with what happened in 20 and maybe to a lesser extent last year, people felt, okay, they're going to fizzle out. I actually think they're probably closer than ever this year. And I think they're going to maybe get an opportunity. I mean, if they look around in Leinster, what have they to fear, really? Yes, they're up against, strong Dublin, strong Kilkenny, strong Galway teams. But they've shown over the last 4 or 5 years that they're well able to dance with the biggest of the teams in Leinster. They've won a Leinster title and that. So,
and is there any line on the pitch you'd look at and think actually that's the one area maybe they're a little bit off?
It's hard to know. I think what they might be lacking at times is real out and out solid defending cornerbacks. I think Shane Reck and these lads are good lads. Simon Donoghue, really good players. But I think what they have to be able to do, I mean, we know they can hurl, we know they can carry the ball through the lines and maraud up and down the field. But I think on the days that they've fallen short, they have been porous. So I think your primary function has to be for some of those guys is, and I think Liam Ryan is central to that. I think even having Matt